Ladies and gentlemen, this is the state of the scene.
Yo, what the fuck is up, Warped Tour? The state of the scene at SOTS Podcast on all social media. Sam here with Marcos.
Do you remember like 2016 when I was like so fucking hip hop coded that I would only speak an ad lib on the show all the fucking time?
It's funny you mention that because we have a question from a patron that relates to that exact topic.
I didn't know.
But before we get there, you told me you experienced some coworker core this week?
I did. So for those unaware, coworker core.
Yeah.
That's like the new term for what I've always called as, octane core, right?
Right.
That was the name that like our founding fathers settled on, and now these kids have come in and they're like coworker core.
Metalcore
like,
for the masses. Yes, that's precisely correct.
Is at work, kid had the speaker on fucking blasting, dude. I'm talking Our Last Night covers.
Oof.
Fame on Fire covers.
Let's go.
I'm talking I Prevail up in that bitch. I'm talking who else? I'm talking, dude, actually some massive throwbacks. Like the Right Now cover from Asking Alexandria. It was all covers. It's just so funny, bro.
Bro was cooking.
Bro was
cooking.
Listen, full transparency. I'm not going to lie. I'm not sitting there like I wasn't enjoying that shit.
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend like I'm above coworker core. A lot of this podcast is based off of our adoration for coworker core. I'd like to think we're the coworkers of the coworkers you tried to burn. What's that saying?
We're the coworkers.
We're the daughters of the witches. Yeah, we're the coworkers of the coworkers. Honestly, I guess like the highest peak of this podcast would really be to be a celebrity to the average coworker core fan. You know what I mean? To be recognized somewhere deep in the lows.
I guess.
Have I heard that voice before? Like, no. I just got put on an accent.
Fucking Austin Butler, your shit. Like, just keep getting deeper and deeper and deeper. You feel me, brother?
Is that what Austin Butler does? Is that his thing?
Austin Butler kind of talks like this now.
Shut the fuck up, because that's not at all how he talks in Dune.
Have you not heard Austin Butler talk recently?
Not actually ever, I think, except for one movie where he fought sandworms.
He's gotten like
very
super
different.
Fucking raspy. And the joke has been like, he just has sounded like Elvis Presley ever since he did the Elvis movie. But now, like, you go and watch the Dune coverage, and it's all just like, it's just really fucking deep like that. Like, it almost sounds like it's hurting him.
Do you think after like a decade of doing this podcast, you and I sound more like podcasters than ever before? It's like, yeah, Sam and Marcos, they used to sound normal, but now they're always like, hey, I'm going to the store. Is there a SOTS podcast on all social media?
Oh, like, does it translate into our real life now?
Talk normal for
Probably.
once. I always share this anecdote that my ninth grade science teacher told me I had a voice for radio.
My favorite podcast story. Tell it.
Has haunted me the entirety of my life and really became a self-fulfilling prophecy, if we're being honest.
Are we sure he just wasn't calling you like kind of ugly?
She
And
possibly. Right, because it's a like double-bladed fucking compliment, right?
Yeah.
It's like incredible voice for a radio show.
You ugly piece of shit.
Where you'll never be seen. Right, but then came the invention of YouTube, and here we are. As always, every link you need is in the description of this episode, including our socials, playlists, merch, and Discord. Subscribe to us on YouTube at SOTS Podcast YT and leave a thumbs up if you're watching the video version of this podcast. Plus, hit that fucking notification button. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave 5 stars. We're still crawling up there to 600 reviews on Spotify, and if we could ever get there, I don't know. I could share some good news with my mother this Easter, so she'll be proud of me. And if you want to support the show, consider becoming a patron for exclusive content, the ability to submit questions to the show, and producer credits on all of our video content. Plus, patrons also receive bonus podcast SOTS Deluxe. On this week's Deluxe, we talk Sleeping with Sirens, massive, big, huge throwback tour, See You Space Cowboy teaming up with Cordy LaFleur Spirit Box, plus the future of Black Veil Brides. And you'll also get early access to Ranking the Scene, our weekly YouTube show where we bring 3 albums to the ever-growing tier list and rank them against every other album that we've brought before in order to build out a accurate catalog of the exact ranking of every album in the alternative music scene ever. This week, Paris Beartooth and Mom Jeans get their fucking feet held to the fire while we rank them against other albums that also come from bands in the scene. It's a very well thought out.
It's a
premise.
weird sell. It's a really weird.
It's a
they
great
get their
premise.
feet held to the fucking flames.
Yeah,
What did you say?
Yeah. They get their like feet held to the fire, and we see if they can
Those little
hang.
toesies.
Can Paris hang? Can Beartooth hang? Can Mom Jeans hang? Fucking, you go watch the show to find out. Can't spoil it for you. But if you want early access, that's patreon.com/SOTS podcast. In Dated Discourse this week, Marcos, barricaders versus crowd surfers. Water parks are currently on tour, and attendees of one of their recent performances took umbrage with fans at the barricade who were said to have actively been dropping and or launching crowd surfers, in theory to discourage them from crowd surfing again, thus protecting their own concert experience. Marcos, I ask you this. Are the barricaders responsible for the crowd surfers, even if it detracts from their own show experience? Go ahead.
Yes.
Yes, the barricaders are responsible for crowd surfers. That's the responsibility you accept by going to the barricade. That's simply how shows work. This is like time in memoriam type shit. You can't rewrite the rules like halfway through the game. This is how things work. You can't just decide you're not a help crowd surfer, guys, when you're standing at the barricade. That's your responsibility. I'm sorry.
I'll be honest. The reason why I think they should be held responsible for this is because if you want the best spot in the house,
you have to suffer in some way.
You need to
just
suffer
like our Lord and Savior
at least one inconvenience.
For what?
It's just like some inconvenience.
Right. It can't all be, nobody gets to have a perfect show.
Exactly. That's all I'm saying.
You're either going to be annoyed by crowd surfers, annoyed by moshers, annoyed by chatty people, annoyed by people who make out, stuck behind a tall person. The concert experience is only meant to be kind of good. Never great, kind of okay, never perfect. And that's like what we all accept. We've all decided to accept this. Do you think this is just another symptom of the increase within the just general culture of people being more interested in their own experience than that of anyone around them, in the same capacity that if you go to a theater and somebody pulls their phone out in the middle of the movie, they really don't give a fuck if they're ruining your experience because they really only care about their own. And so if they're a little bored and they want to look at their phone, they really don't fucking care if you want to watch a movie, right? In the same way that like somebody at Barricade wants to watch a show, they don't really care about your crowd surfing experience. They just want you away so that you don't ruin their time watching a show. It's just like everyone is very involved in their self-interest right now, and we're losing community in that sense. And concerts are meant to be community, and community means picking up crowd surfers and helping them get all the way up there so they can be the closest to Austin Night for a millisecond before the next individual is the closest to Austin Night for a millisecond. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I don't have too much to add to this. This is like one of the oldest discourses out there. This is
the most dated discourse.
This is the Old Testament right here.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, barricaders, crowd surfers, this goes back to BC, to be honest. I don't know. Again, it's your obligation. If you want the best spot in the house, that's my opinion. Suffer. In some capacity, you must suffer.
What's the best spot in the venue?
It's actually like 6 rows back and to the left.
Okay.
Because you
specifically
miss
the left, not the right.
Well, because you miss like most of the crowd surfers.
Sure.
You're not in the danger zone, the mosh pit area, and like you got a pretty good view still. You know,
for what it's worth, let it be known that crowd surfers are annoying, right? But it's their inherent right that they're allowed to be annoying and get to crowd surf. That's just show behavior.
Yeah, my opinion, it's evil versus evil here. That's the discussion.
Barricaders annoy you as well. What the fuck did they do?
Oh my god, they're social media fucking queuing for all day and night, and finally got Barricade. God forbid you experience any inconvenience in your life.
Get a job. Patreon questions this week, Marcos. If you want to write in to the show, you can join at patreon.com/SOTS podcast. Let's start with Casey. How do you guys feel about when bands/artists re-release previous songs, but with a feature this time where there wasn't one before? Especially ones that aren't significantly different other than the feature, like a reimagining or anything like that.
I mean, just overall, I fuck with it, right? I think that it breathes a little bit more life into that track.
A little more excitement.
Excitement on our end as the fan, because for me, I'm suddenly excited to go listen to a song I've already heard before.
I think this is specifically because didn't Heart Attack Man release Like a Kennedy this week with Austin Knight, and he wasn't there before?
Exactly.
And it doesn't sound dramatically different. It's just like Austin Knight sings a verse now.
Right. So like that's sort of some of the problem here is like sometimes it doesn't sound dramatically different and it's like, eh.
I mean, we all know what's happening though, right? Like it's algorithm gaming,
sure,
right? Like it's just like clearly adding a feature where there wasn't one before just is going to help this track in ways that it wouldn't have otherwise.
It works like organically for me though, because suddenly I see that and I'm like, huh. Well, I want to go experience that song. I've already heard it, but like, well, I haven't heard this version, and now
it's like
I'm
a fresh
interested.
coat of paint, sure.
And you know, a little bit more on Casey's question here, like that'll extend to a reimagination as well. Like I think Devil Wears Prada put out a song off of Color Decay that featured Roy Rodriguez. It was like acoustic or something, and it's like, regardless of how I'm going to feel about that song, like coming out of it, like I'm interested in going to listen to it. Whereas if it was just
so what you're saying is that algorithm gaming works on you as well on a very like personal level.
Right. Like
we all know what's happening here. It just feels harmless, right? Like it just feels harmless. Like obviously, yes, like a feature incorporated from the jump that's been like considered and like part of the creative process and was always meant to be there is probably going to be a lot more impactful than one that's sort of like tagged on after the fact. But like, I don't know that second tag on version is really any sort of like a malady on the scene in any way, right? It just seems like a net positive.
Right.
Yeah. Marcus Aragas, who are your favorite rappers? Remember at the top when you were like I used to be big on rap. The fucking thing is that I was reading this question earlier and I stopped for a second. I was thinking to myself, honest to God, I just like it's been so long since I've fucked with anything outside of scene music. Like it's probably been a few years at this point where all of my listening time isn't directly dedicated to just music within the alternative scene for me to really build any appreciation for rappers that aren't like, you know, some of these fucking emo hip hop guys. But like, I was trying to think back to like, when did it really matter to me? And I would probably say that like my rap adoration, like if we're talking like pop culture wise, probably ended with Juice WRLD in like kind of a sad way. Like I feel like
it's pretty sad.
It just feels like it was that era of rap that I feel like I was most in tune with. And then I think just like after, I simply have not kept up in the same way. Like I see names and like they register, right? Like I see whatever Playboy Cardi is a name that like I know who that is. I just don't fucking check any of it out, right?
To all those Lil Uzi songs.
And I don't want to get roasted for saying MGK is like my favorite rapper right now, but that's probably like the last fucking rap song I listened to was probably MGK because there's some sort of like connection, like there's the spider web connects him to the scene still in some capacity, because otherwise I just don't check it out at all. And it's not because I dislike it. I just like, I only have so much time, and so much of my music listening time is dedicated to everything that's going to go into this show or everything that I'm going to share on like social media. And then when I'm not doing that, I generally don't want to listen to music. You know what I mean? So like, unless it's me putting on a playlist to work out to, which more often than not is just fucking metalcore classics, then I'm listening to podcasts and I'm just not listening to music. So like I get a song every once in a while from my girlfriend that's like, hey, check this out. But otherwise I pick up nothing from pop culture anymore.
Fair enough.
Makes me feel disconnected in a way, but I just don't think I can remedy it. Like there's only so much time I have to spread and I don't have enough time.
I'm way more disconnected from hip hop.
You used to be super fucking connected to way more than I ever was.
Like I used to have like the fucking Rap Caviar playlist on rotation all of the time. Like it was quite the opposite of you. Like I'd listen to all this scene stuff and I was done with it and I'm like, now it's time to go listen to some rap.
Now it's time to listen to real music. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Man, I really had a real fondness for like that SoundCloud era, and as a lot of those artists have passed on now, I think that is also like where some of that disconnect has.
Yeah, like I think of like
come into
Juice
play.
World, and I think of like X, and I was like, that was the last time I ever felt like I was really like aware like of what was happening in the hip hop scene. Now it's like,
And that's like back in 2016 or 2017 at this
right,
point.
it's
2018.
been a while. Yeah.
Favorite rappers for me. God,
I guess this could
one's
be
gonna
historical,
like any of these
right? I guess it
answers.
could be historical. What are your answers?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I used to like really fuck with PNB Rock, who also fucking passed. All that like sad boy SoundCloud shit, I loved.
That was the era for me. Like that's when it felt like it really like spoke to me the most, right?
Yep.
I was like, oh yeah, no, I fuck with Nothing Nowhere. This is why I always have this interest in going back and checking out Lil Peep, because I feel like it feels to me as if that has to be a treasure trove of something I would adore and that I've just never gone and checked out.
Yeah. I'm sure you'd really enjoy some of that stuff. I don't think Lil Peep ever really connected that much with me.
I was like super in the Childish Gambino for like a hot minute, but it's also because I adore Atlanta.
Yeah. I really fuck with
I actually love rappers who have TV shows now that I think about it. Because Lil Dicky,
you're a big Lil Dicky guy.
if they have a TV show, I'm like really into that.
God, I'm blanking on so many names, which is the unfortunate part of this. But like, I don't know. Like,
But it's also so outside of my space that I feel like you said, I'm gonna get roasted for this. I'm like, yeah, I feel like any name I bring up, somebody's gonna be like, oh, this fucking guy.
right.
This
Like,
fucking
I'll say
guy.
21 Savage, and somebody would be like, "What? Really?" It's like, no, he's a really good fucking rapper. I don't know. 21 Savage is definitely up there. None of like the serious shit for the most part. Like I don't know. Like I don't really get too fucking worked up about rap nowadays, but I don't know. PNB Rock, 21 Savage. I don't know.
I used to love the fucking height the where they fucking get like 12 rappers who you didn't know at ciphers.
Yeah.
I fucking love that.
Yeah,
shit.
there's
but
the
even that has
2016
lost
Cypher
a
that's,
lot
like, the
of
most
like
popular thing.
yeah, but like now those don't even hit the same for me. Like
Yeah.
they just don't. It's I'm not as like invested or whatever.
Made in Tokyo was a lot of fun too. I really fucked with him. All like that. All the ad lib shit I fucking love so much.
What a great name. Caillou asks, would you rather be able to listen to music that came out this year and future music, or only be able to listen to music that came out before this year and in the past?
Would you rather only be able to listen to music that came out this year?
Right, so
and
you can only
future
listen to music from 2024 forward, or you can only listen to music from 2023 backwards.
2020
You gotta draw, like,
2024
a
has
fucking
been off
line.
to a hot start.
It's been off to a fucking hot start. You're right. It's always new for me. It's always new. I just like, I don't ever want to stop ingesting scene music and become one of those guys who's like,
Go work.
you remember Yellow Card? Like every time like I like this fucking this like elder emo shit where you like scroll through Instagram reels and it's guys like who are like 32 and they're like, when a Day to Remember song comes on, and they fucking leave their kid on the stove and they go start dancing or something. I was like, ugh, don't let me become a dad. Please don't.
You also have those people where it's like, I don't know, I lost the thought.
What kind of
I'm
people?
so
What kind of
fucking
people?
mad.
Those
I
people
lost
who
the
what?
thought.
Those people. We're talking
Lost
like
the thought.
boomers. We're talking about.
No, it's like, oh, like the last Avenged Sevenfold album I listened to, like, yeah, 2007. It's like, what? What are you talking about?
Every time I post something on Twitter, and it's like I share like
I forgot this band existed. You're the problem.
right, and it's like I was like, oh hey, let me share a Make Them Suffer song, and somebody's like, damn, these guys are still around. I'm like, how fucking like
Haven't listened to them since their first EP.
right. Like you're giving the attention to the scene that I give to rap music, right? But when you do it to me, like it becomes like incredibly frustrating. I was
Right.
like, how dare you? Fran asks, I've recently stumbled upon six rarely human. It starts with a 6, and then it says airly, and then it says human. What? How do we want to fucking say that?
I've
Sixerly
recently
human,
stumbled upon Barely Human.
barely human. Thank you.
It's like Six Lack. No, Black. That's
okay.
their name. Also, that's one of my favorite rappers, for sure. I don't know.
Well, at least something came of this. Whose style can only describe as 2009. All right, I'm gonna start from the top. We gotta do this from the top. Fran asks over on patreon.com/SOTS podcast. You can sign up for only $3 a month. I recently stumbled upon Barely Human, whose style can only be described as 2009 MySpace scene core. Judging by their 6.7 million Spotify listeners, they are twice as popular as Sleep Token.
I hate that.
You ever heard of them? As far as I know, they have never been mentioned on the show, and I've never heard any kind of buzz about them from any of their scene music. Is dance music like that just not part of the scene?
Get your ass out of here.
You throwing a flag on the play on this one?
What the fuck was that?
What do we even say something is part of the scene? Why do we include music influenced by From First to Laugh, but seemingly exclude artists that sound like Carver, Broken Side? All right, you put a lot of words in our mouth. That is not necessarily. You put a lot on us that isn't necessarily accurate. We covered Millionaires not 3 weeks ago. When Warped Tour was a place where all of these stylings combined and formed a scene with such musical diversity, Marcus, you and I have never limited the extent of which genres can be included on this. The only barrier to entry for us is the time in which we have to fully explore the breadth of the scene. Like, you will ever only get a picture, a like snapshot of theoretically what is some of the more popular artists, though, like clearly Barely Human is one of them, and they've just completely like flown over our heads. And this, if anything, is obviously like gonna get me to go out and check that artist out.
No, it ain't.
Why they're so popular.
Fran,
it will for me.
Because you should reconsider your approach, because now I don't have much interest in Barely Human.
You just
because
don't
I've
like
been
to be chastised. You just
I've been
don't like to be
chastised on my own goddamn show.
You're just like, you can't handle the manager telling you what to do. You're that guy. Was there even a fucking question here? Combined and formed, Warped Tour was a place where all these stylists combined and formed a scene with such musical diversity. Why do we include, is this not part of the scene? What do you even mean when we say something is part of the scene? I mean, you know it when you hear it. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Is that like fair? A lot of it for me is like, they've been integrated into the scene in some capacity, whether they've toured with the artist, whether
they've collaborated
whether
with
the scene itself feels like they're talking about these artists a lot. You know, there are a lot of artists who aren't necessarily seen, but like in some ways you give them like a certain pass. Like there are moments in time where I've been like, do we talk about Post Malone? Because it just feels like, you know, I feel like the scene is talking a lot about this artist.
There's the photo out there with fucking like Bring Me the Horizon.
Right. Juice WRLD, like I mentioned earlier, was one of these artists. Like once they collaborate with like Brendan Urie, I'm like, oh, is this kind of like, does this? And they say like, hey, they go out and they like post an Instagram and they're like, hey, yo, I love Old Escape the Fate. You know what I mean? And you're like, oh, all right, yeah, they're seeing.
Exactly.
Yeah. But it's like, I don't know until I know, you know what I mean? But now I'm going to go check out Barely Human, Fran. I appreciate the suggestion. Andrew asks, what's the reason you guys fell off going to shows so hard this year? I feel like there's so many amazing tours that have come through the Northeast and are coming through later this spring, summer. Do y'all just not have the time anymore, or is it an age thing, like you're growing out of it, respectfully? I like that you added respectfully, as in it's still part of the question. No, it's just like off to the side. Like, yeah, but they did write respectfully. They are being respectful, and you need to know that they're being respectful when they say, are you guys too fucking old for shows now? No, that's not the problem. I just like, I mentioned this when we were talking about a couple weeks back. It's just like, it's really gray, honestly. I don't think there's a black and white aspect to any of this. It's ultimately just this feeling lately of constantly feeling overwhelmed with everything I have to do, so that when I finally have time for myself, I so desperately want to do nothing. Again, reminders, like we have lives outside of this show. We've got lives. Surprise, right? No, like, podcast not paying the bills. That's for goddamn sure. It's for goddamn sure. 2 full-time jobs that often ask like overtime out of us. Travel, things like this, personal relationships, all that. Sam and I don't exactly live together either. It's not like I can just pop in at a moment's notice and just bang out some content, or we have a venue located in the middle of us that we can meet. Like, no, it's either an hour above me or an hour below you, you know? As lives become more involved, then things that used to be easy, like just picking up on a Thursday and going to a show, becomes a little bit more of a to do. And obviously it's specific to like the individual, and it's not like we're not just going to end up in a show in like 6 weeks or something. Like it's just going to naturally happen. We'll just end up back at a show. It's just like, I
think the floodgates open from there.
I think maybe a little break is actually not the worst thing in the world. And like most of these tours of amazing bands coming through, like a lot of the time you and I will be like, okay, like this is a can't miss artist. And then a lot of these other artists we've seen a bunch before.
Yeah,
like
seen them 4 or 5, sometimes upwards to like 20 times. And it's like, I don't know. We have been to a lot of shows. So it's not like we've only gone to 2 shows a year and we're suddenly, cutting it off.
Yeah, we're like a fucking 100 shows deep. And that's not including Warped Tour where I'm seeing like 20 artists in a day when we were doing that shit. It's like, yeah, sure.
We're like at least 1,000 sets deep.
Seen 1,000 sets, and I dropped every fucking crowd surfer that came out.
Cross my arms to every one of them.
Hey, we checked out some fucking albums.
The breakdown.
Yeah, let's discuss them. Starting with Self Hell by While She Sleeps. This is the Sheffield, UK Quintet's 6th studio album, released independently the 29th of March via the band's label, Sleeps Brothers, and of course distributed by Spine Farm Records. Self Hell consists of 12 tracks and is the much anticipated follow-up to 2021 Sleeps Society LP.
Let's pause there for a second.
Yeah.
What is your memory of Sleep Society?
Let me rank it for you.
What are you ranking?
Some ranking
like
the scene
whole
content.
Are you ranking the whole discography right now?
Some ranking the scene content on the regular show. That's probably the most middle of the road While She Sleeps album for me. Like that's where I'd put it firmly in the middle. It's not the worst one. It's not the best one.
I remember hearing that record and feeling a little bit like how do I phrase this? That the While She Sleeps of it all felt a little tired. It felt a little retreaded. It wasn't as exciting.
Wasn't
this
rubbing
time
off
around.
on you as
it
much.
It felt too familiar, and ultimately, outside of a song or two, it kind of bounced off on me. Though
it had
I
the
will
song
say,
with What's His Face. That was incredible.
they had the track "Nervous" with Simon of Biffy Clyro, which I still think is a
That's what I said. The song with What's His Face.
phenomenal track. Yes, but I do think it felt a little bit like While She Sleeps got caught in a pattern with that record, and I was not as excited for it that time around.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty much there with you. Like
I'd almost say it's probably, maybe, I guess in that sense, maybe it's my least favorite While She Sleeps record. It just clearly feels like the one that had, I just think when I think back about it, it feels like the one that had the least impact on me. It's the one that it went from being a band who every release I thought was incredibly exciting to this one maybe being the first one that just kind of didn't hit me the same way.
Interesting. So let's move on.
I don't even remember it being bad. I just don't I just remember that it didn't click the way that prior records had.
Fair enough. I'm curious how many of the 6, what the fans of Sleeps, are we the Society now? Did it change? I don't know.
Right, so we were the 6 and now we're the Sleep Society.
Right.
I think that's obviously one and the same.
The 6 Society.
Yeah.
We'll move on a little bit here. So some dressing to this discussion here. Self Hell was produced by longtime collaborator Carl Brown with the help of the band's creative mastermind and guitarist Sean Long, who is specifically credited as a producer on the last album as well. Meanwhile, Sam, I don't know if you know this, on So What and You Are We, production credits are cited as Carl, again, of course, and the whole band just While She Sleeps, which I thought was a little interesting. Also came as a surprise to me here that Carl Brown has produced every album by this band. I was a little surprised. I guess it just never.
That would explain why it feels like While She Sleeps has always remained very consistent in their style.
Definitely. Quick note too, Carl Brown also has some song credits on tracks from Holding Absence to Trivium to Neck Deep to Bring Me to the Horizon, Obey. Most
Strictly
notably,
British acts.
yes. Most notably, Carl is credited as the producer of the last few Bullet for My Valentine albums, and of course, our 2023 AOTY Sleep Tokens Take Me Back to Eden.
Well, that would be the credit. I suppose.
That did not register for me at the time.
No, it didn't either. I actually, now that you mention it, I don't even remember like the producer of that album sticking with me in any capacity. Like when I think back on that album, it's weird because you're right. Well, with everybody else, I do feel like a producer comes up and we talk about it a lot. With Sleep Token, it just escaped us.
That was them departing from a longtime producer as well to collaborate with Carl Brown.
So you're saying Carl Brown is quite literally the magic that made Sleep Token what it is today? Worth considering.
Maybe the magic that made
if it's the one aspect of the
Sleeps.
formula that changes.
Hey, you're not wrong. Also worth noting, all these albums, or this album rather, scroll the fuck back up. Also worth noting, these albums recorded in some part within the band's own studio, 6 Audio, sometimes referred to as Sleeps Audio, which is located in the band's Sleeps headquarters, the HQ, located in Sheffield as well, Steel City.
So one of the coolest fucking things any band has ever done, like splitting from their label, starting their own thing, getting the fans to support it, and then building like their own studio. Like absolute like fucking DIY ethics to their fucking core. Incredibly impressive what they accomplished.
Well, how much of it is just their identity is one of the coolest parts of this for sure. So the new album then is Self Hell, a title that Laws, the band's vocalist, came up with. It instantly clicked with the band, not just for the fact it sounds like a metal record, according to Matt, member of the band, guitarist, or the fact he loved the aesthetics of 4 letters stacked on 4, but for the unique personal meaning that each and every listener can ascribe to it.
Love this.
In quotations here, for anyone in a bad situation, for you to realize that you need to focus on yourself and fix whatever's going on, you have to be at the worst of it to realize that you need to change. It's self-hell before self-help, explains Matt. If you think of a pendulum, it doesn't change direction until it's at the furthest fucking point, I love the emphasis there, possible before it returns to center. If the center is where you are in a happy place, you have to be fucking up here to know how to get back. That's self-hell, that moment.
It's kind of a different way of like explaining like what a rock bottom is.
Yes, it absolutely is.
I like it. It's
Sean
interesting.
Long expands further in an unrelated press release. I think I pulled that from an interview with Kerrang.
Related but different press release. Still related to the topic at hand, I'm sure. Yeah.
The name of the album is the foundation of how we view ourselves and the world. Everyone has some subjective experience like no other. Yet the constant that binds us is the difference between us and the fact that we are all suffering in our own way. Don't be too quick to judge and demonize. Your time will come for redemption or damification.
This
Sam.
you know what this reads like? This reads like when somebody is talking about like a specific person, but they're like dancing around it. It's like you're like that moment where they look like directly at the camera. It's like you will be judged.
There's some shade there.
Redemption or damnification. That's your choice.
Some details on Self-Hell's inspirations before we ourselves discuss this album in detail, Sam. The band drew inspiration from The Prodigy, Aphex Twin, Gorillaz, Kendrick Lamar, Daft Punk, and more.
Can we pause there?
Yeah.
Can we pause there for just a second?
We can pause.
Do you know Aphex Twin whatsoever?
I believe Aphex Twin is the actress that is going to feature, artist/actress that is going to feature opposite Bill Skarsgård in The Crow, Sam.
This is so funny. This is the funniest thing
That
you've
is
ever
my
said.
frame of reference
That
for
is
Aphex
that
Twin.
is the funniest fucking thing you have ever said on this. I can't even focus.
That movie
right
looks
now.
awful, by the way. Not because of Aphex Twin, but because it looks awful. It looks the fucking song, the slowed down
is,
fucking.
please continue. This
I
is
see
so
a
fucking
fucking-
funny. This is so fucking. Keep going, please.
I see I read a red door and I want to paint it black. What fucking song did they slow down for that trailer?
It's the
It was
Rolling
God
Stones.
awful. I
So-
know we're gonna review it in the fucking.
Who
Sum
you're
41
thinking
album.
of is FKA Twigs.
Who the fuck is Aphex Twin? Or fucking Aphex Twin? Who the fuck is that? It's got to be like the same amount of syllables or some shit. Some account. I don't know.
And by the way, the Crow sucks, bro. Aphex Twin is an Irish-British musician and composer. So
Yeah.
my singular reference for Aphex Twin is back when Alt Press had a podcast, they had this one episode where they had like
Rest in piss, bozo.
Sean from the Matches, a couple other artists, and Sonny Moore.
Sean from the
First to
Matches. What
Last.
pull?
They had
Ultimate
like
respect.
4 artists that were like really hot that year, like up and coming, and they had them all in a room and they asked them all what their favorite song of all time was. And I always remember that Sonny Moore from First to Last chose an Aphex Twin song.
What the fuck?
Yeah, and it was actually really cool. Like it was really fucking cool.
It oddly, or maybe not even oddly, it's weirdly poetic how much that tracks with what would be Sonny Moore's future.
Who would go out to become? Yeah, that's precisely correct. I don't think he was Skrillex at the time. I think he was definitely from First to Last.
Yeah.
So I would love to go back and re-listen to that episode. I don't even know if you can get those fucking
He
podcasts
can't
anymore.
have been in From First to Last much longer following that.
He had that realization while recording the show. Anyways,
so
FKA
all
Twigs
these
and-
inspirations, the band decided to lean into into an EDM infused sound on a number of songs throughout the album, even incorporating. I thought this is like my favorite tidbit of all of this dressing here. The use of very vintage synthesizers such as the Korg MS-20. Are you familiar, Sam? I wasn't, so I researched
I'm
it.
not familiar with the Korg MS-20.
In production between the years 1978 and 1983. So it's been a hot minute. And then also the Behringer TD3 only produced between 1981 and 1984. So they dusted off the oldest equipment in the closet and they incorporated it into this album, which I thought
I
was
like
very
that even their approach in doing something that everyone else does, they still find a way to put their own unique spin on it. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, very neat. So, more on inspirations. On that Kerrang cover story they did, Laws also cites Radiohead and Placebo as inspirations, not so much musically, which is why I included this tidbit, but for their attitude and vibe, all of which feeds into a new sound the singer delightedly dubs Brit Mosh, which is my favorite part of this.
I got a couple hot thoughts here.
Okay.
First, I think that every band should have to come up with their own
A new term every
to
album.
describe their
yes.
genre. No, not even new ever.
Oh.
It just has to be their band, right?
Okay.
Like I'm thinking about like See You Space Cowboy has been coining themselves as like sasscore. You know what I mean?
Yes.
People don't talk about bad homes, they're talking about baddiecore. I feel like everybody needs a specific thing that defines their style and their approach, right? I prefer when it ends in core because I think that's a nice way to like tie them all together.
So you mentioned those two, but what are some of your favorite ones? Because I've got one
always,
that I
always loved Gross Pop.
I was gonna say it.
Always loved Gross Pop
for
the
an
years,
album.
yeah.
I didn't even fuck with that hard in artwork.
They're not all flowing to me, but there have been so many over the years. Violin core for Imminence recently,
Yes.
right? And it's like it's so them, and like you see it, and you're like, yeah, that's violin core.
What else
like,
could it be?
And now if any other band like fucking brings a violin in, it's like, oh, they're doing the Imminence thing. You know what I mean? But like I like Brit Mosh. I like
Mosh
it.
it's got a good feel to it. It's not like an S tier level genre.
No, I think it's
title.
got some S tier potential to it. I think if they ran with it, it's got some S tier potential to it. So what's funny is this band is doing a lot of the things that used to like scare me when I was younger when metalcore bands started talking this way. Like the second they're in an interview and Ollie Sykes is like, influences? Stock influences.
Aphex
right
Twins.
now.
Fucking FKA Twigs.
So I've been listening to a lot of Beyonce lately, and yeah, you know, I've just been fucking a lot with like that new Miley Cyrus.
We get more of that, not specifically in this review.
Imagine
like in a couple
Dragons.
more albums.
Yeah. But the second band started talking like that as a teenager, like I'd start sweating. I'd be like, oh no, God, please, if you're up there.
Yeah, right. Like,
don't let them kill my metalcore.
Well, you mentioned like the Sonny Moore thing. Like, I probably bet you saw the Aphex Twin thing. You were like, it's so over for first.
No, it's the opposite now. It's the opposite.
Yeah?
Oh yeah. I know what you. No. That was a very different thing. It wasn't like what's influencing from first to last. It was just like, hey, what's your favorite song? And I found it fascinating. But like, I always remember like when they used to ask bands like in fucking like All Press to be like, hey, yo, what kind of things you listen to? They'd be like, fucking not metal, yo. Absolutely not. Yo, I listened to the new yeah, exactly. Precisely correct. Yeah, whatever like popular music was around at the time. It's like metal guys always talk about how they never listened to metal, right? And that always like scared me until I grew older and started to realize that it never fucking mattered at all. And now I actually find it a little exciting when artists start like quoting things that are like very outside of the wheelhouse of everything that I've heard from them before, because I'm like, okay,
I sort of admire it
this
now.
is fuck around energy. I love fuck around energy. We're doing something different. I want to hear something different. Like, how do you take all of those influences and bleed them into your style, for better or worse? You know, we'll get into that, right?
I mean, Laws expands on it. And this is the last quote before we really start discussing the actual contents of Self Hell. Laws continues, again, Korean cover story. I love metalcore, but I think we all feel like it's overly saturated now. And I actually really love the entirety of this quote, Sam.
He's right. And I just need to stop everyone right now before they jump into the comments and they're like, okay, Bad Omens? Okay, Sleep Token? Like, they never mean everything. This is never a catch-up.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is never black and white.
Well, no, I think you'll kind of understand what he means as I finish this quote.
I shouldn't have cut you off.
No.
I shouldn't have cut you off.
You're more than welcome
I'm
to.
so sorry.
Tons of bands feel like they push their music through the metalcore machine and they have the right packages on their laptop. And that is the side that I fell out of love with. Not another metalcore band sounding great.
What does that last quote mean?
Not another metalcore band sounding great. Like, it can't be, you can't all sound great. Like, that's how that comes across to me. And I love that because he's not wrong.
He's saying metalcore's become homogenized.
Yeah.
Is what he's saying. Yes. Yeah. Which I understand. And I think there is a level of truth to it. And I think, you know, you can like those metalcore bands while still accepting that that's true. I
didn't pull some of the rest of this quote, but he goes on to be like, you know, there's just not a lot of character in these bands' sounds anymore.
Lack personality. Yep.
And I can think of like 2-3 times a week where like we're seeing an artist like pop off on the timeline and you and me look at each other and we're like, man, it sounds like 10 other band. Like, this doesn't do anything for me.
Right. And then like,
it sounds too good. There's nothing there.
I don't want to put myself above it though, because there are alternatively moments when I hear something that everybody else goes, this sounds like every other metalcore band I've ever listened to. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't know. Like, the hook hits. Like, I'm not going to hate just to hate, right? Because I do it as well, right?
There's exceptions for sure.
But it's I am aware of it, right? And you definitely see, I think we've seen the most of it recently because when it comes to like pulling those certain streaming numbers, like getting that certain attention on playlists, hitting that fucking Octane top 25 countdown,
the big ones.
It's a certain style that plays, and you see every other band adopt that style, right? And you see it a lot also when one band is immensely successful doing it, right?
Quick pause. I leased a new car recently, and obviously those come with like fucking Sirius XM subscriptions for a couple months.
You've been dipping your toes in a little Sirius XM?
I threw on Octane Core, or I threw on Octane.
Right, threw on Octane, which naturally was right. Octane Core, yeah.
Just to get a feel for like what a radio program sounds nowadays. And hats off to like Katie Babes or Bibes.
Katie Babs.
Babs, who does a really great job just hosting that weekly show outright, or daily show. I don't know what the fuck it is. I was just really impressed. I was like, damn, this is actually like a pretty good... It's for like a radio show. It's like very entertaining.
See somebody else living your dream and doing it well.
Yeah, it's tough. It's like, damn, been doing this how many years? You're like lapping me.
I wasn't aware of your game,
right? Yes. Very good stuff over there. Sam, Self Hell. Let's actually fucking talk about this album. Okay, can I start off here?
By all means, the floor is yours.
I adore how this album kicks off with Peace of Mind.
Okay,
what a fucking A1 opener. Incredible build-up. really like out of left field, like songwriting approach and delivery from this band.
So you're feeling all of the things that the band was speaking about this record instant,
right off the top, kind of, sort of, for sure. That song it's just got a wonderful energy to it. I think it's a really honestly, I could have listened to that track specifically go on for like another minute or two and just really like keep building and explode into something different. And the only like, as far as decision making goes on this album, I don't like, there's a moment on this, there's a lyric on this song where it's like, are you afraid of the, and it cuts off. And that's sort of like a recurring thing with many of the lines in these verses on this track.
Almost like,
so it kind of starts with that and then ends with that too.
Speaking back to the filling in the blanks that they're talking about, that sort of speaks to the title of the album, right? Where
Exactly.
they're saying like everyone's self-hell is individualized. So this idea that you would continue the line for them is actually like a real sort of fun creative choice.
So it kills me that like,
There is an instance where this doesn't happen.
well, like it ends again on that, are you afraid of the, and then the song cuts off.
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes into Leave Me Alone, but Leave Me Alone has like a 5-second like build to a sound that you hear on this song. Like there's no like transition into like this crazy ass fucking, like it neutralizes itself a little bit.
Okay.
Or you know what I mean? Like
So
it sort of loses some momentum.
We're not talking about this fill in the blank thing. We're talking about something. We're talking about just how like the transition isn't as exciting as you would have hoped it would be.
The song ends on like what you would anticipate being a bang to kick off the next song, but it kills the momentum because for like 5
almost
seconds,
like a hard cut. In a
right?
way.
It doesn't get there. It's not the song it should transition into, or they could have built a transition there that would have sounded better. Meanwhile, though, like to clarify, I'm still fully on board at this
Tell
point.
me more.
Like,
Tell me more about what you like about this record.
Leave Me Alone kicks in, and then like I really adore that chorus, like the leave me the fuck alone, just like the really like
I had a fucking spiritual awakening listening to the song. I don't know how else to say it.
the alienated, like sort of like indifferent delivery on that song. I really adore that.
Let me talk about for just a second the singles. I remember hearing Self-Hell, the lead single, the title track, and thinking, dear God, it's so over.
It's a fucking
simply
mess.
Is such a hard turn, and I think that even in the capacity, like even in this album, within this album, and with all of the knowledge of this band's approach, I understand maybe what they were going for, or at the very least that like creatively they're trying to like stretch their legs a little bit. I just feel like it is crippling when you hit that chorus and how little it connects. It's just any
And
level
you're saying
of
that,
like interest I
rings
have in
true
the song.
still?
Yeah, it's just like it cuts the legs out from under it. So it's like it's almost irrelevant of everything else it's doing. When you get to the meat of that song, it falls flat. And so everything else around it, I'm no longer interested in. This was followed up by Down featuring Malevolence, which I think is a very like straight ahead song from this band.
Pretty
right?
run of the mill track.
Right,
yeah.
like it's not that flashy. It's very like, you know, just the bare bones like metalcore. Just
Well,
like
even your guest vocalist isn't a flashy vocalist, so it's like okay, it's fine. It's
your
okay track.
Father's metalcore is like tip the cap, respect. And so like I'm 2 singles deep and I'm like, man, I've got some trepidation going into this album. And then we get to The Flowers and I'm like, I finished hearing that song and watching that music video and I'm like, this might be the greatest thing this band has ever done. Like they've won me back instantly. Like they've even got me reconsidering those old singles. I'm like, I was wrong. This song's so good that I had to have been wrong.
Honestly, dude,
They've retroactively fixed everything.
To the Flowers outright is the best song on this album, and also possibly one of my favorite songs by this band. Period. Mm-hmm. Even before watching the video, like I listened to this song like 5 times straight, and I was like nearly moved to tears because it is a very emotional track. But like the composition, the like the layering, the overall production, like hats off to Carl and Sean for like the production side of things here.
Yeah.
While She Sleeps consistently have such a full sound, and it's a very explosive sound when it all comes together in the form of like, you know, a breakdown or whatever.
They know how to make
crescendos really impressively.
Hairs on your arms stand up straight.
And that's the best example of that in like nearly their catalog for me. And then like watching the video again, like nearly moved to tears. It's such a fucking incredible track, just top to bottom, that it completely rewrites the history of the two songs before. It's like, oh, you know, suddenly excited for this album.
And then getting to my point, I heard Leave Me Alone like whatever, like a week before this dropped, and I was like, this is such a fucking like classic. Like this has an incredible hook on it. Like I can't get it out of my head. This is such a fun track. And so like all of this like fear I had going into this album that it was going to underwhelm me was sort of like just like completely extinguished hearing these like last two singles, right?
Nearly inverted, Sam, because suddenly again, like I'm excited for this record.
But
I was sort of dreading it leading up to it.
Ultimately, like in the capacity of the singles, I do feel the same though. I still feel as if those last two are nearly perfect, while those first two are sort of incredibly forgettable, and they remain so on this record.
I've got a real weird relationship with Self-Hell, because you're not wrong. Like I'm really enjoying like the first three tracks on this album. Rainbows specifically has like a fucking, it's got like this blistering riffy breakdown thing at like the halfway point that I fucking adore.
Blistering riffy core should be what While She Sleeps uses to describe themselves.
It's Brit Mosh, you know?
Precisely.
And then it's followed up with Self-Hell.
Yeah.
And like part of me enjoys some aspects of that song, but it's so messy as a whole.
I like when a band takes
that chorus,
swing,
like you said,
but that doesn't necessarily mean that they hit it out of the park, right? They took a swing. I just think they struck out on that one.
Soured for the rest of time for me though by like the visuals that I relate to it. Like that video,
the music video for Self-Hell
is ingrained in my memory in a way that like I wish I could scrub it.
One of my least favorites. You're
From
right.
my
Like
brain.
It has a negative like corration to like your feeling of the song.
You
100%.
compared it to like a Target ad before.
I specifically said it feels
never,
like a T-Mobile commercial.
Yeah, I've never been able to get that out of my mind since, and like it bothers me. I still like that song still does not sit right with me, and it's unfortunate that it is then the title track, but I do sort of still like the overall like message in like the album title and all that though. Like
Do
that
you
doesn't
think that
that's not lost on
it's meant
me.
to communicate something different? Like it's meant to say like if their goal here was to say, hey, we are taking some risks and doing some things different, then releasing Self-Hell as the lead single is the best way of establishing that, and maybe even more so naming the entire album after it. You know what I mean? Like I feel like it's doing a lot of that work. It's just frustrating that ultimately it ends up being a song that I don't really enjoy in any capacity.
Yeah, it's a little long.
Which isn't to say that makes it sound like I don't enjoy when this band experiments at all, which is not at all the case. I want to talk a little bit about Out of the Blue, which is a deeper cut on this album that I think is one of the coolest things that While She Sleeps have ever done, because in the past, I feel like when they've done instrumentals, even on this album, when they do an instrumental like No Feelings Is Final featuring Aether, they've always felt like interludes that are meant to almost be like calming and like cut the album up into like different segments and almost be like a breath, like before you get back into things. And this feels categorically different than the instrumentals this band has done in the past, because it feels like they figured out a way to encapsulate the soul of what While She Sleeps is in a song, but do so with the vocals stripped entirely from it. And I just think it's such a neat little creative output. Out of the Blue, I think, ranks at the very top of the tracks on this record for just being, I think, like creatively like one of the neatest things that While She Sleeps has ever done.
It's been a while since I've heard a instrumental interlude of sorts that has resonated with me as much as this song has, specifically Out of the Blue. It's been since like
you know what the last one that comes to mind for me is? Go ahead.
Is it off Headspace by Issues?
No, you know what I was gonna say is I remember Below by Beartooth being an album that I was sort of ambivalent about, and then they had that closer that was just like an instrumental.
The last riff?
Yeah, and I was like,
Yeah.
quietly, this is the best track on this whole album.
I guess not wrong. but like this is an inherently different approach because
This is completely different.
It is
yes.
such an out of left field thing for a band like While She Sleeps. And while
Not necessarily. They've had interludes like this not like Out of the Blue in particular, but I remember on Brainwash they had, I think it was at least 2 interludes on that album.
Okay. No, I guess I don't remember Brainwash that much.
Brainwash does quietly feel like a very forgotten within this band's catalog type album.
I get Brainwashed and So What confused so often. I don't know if it's because of like the red similarities in the artwork. I don't know. But no, Out of the Blue, and I forget the song title, but there's a song between it's off of Headspace by Issues. It's on the back half. I think it's right before like the closing track. And it's just like a really beautiful song that it's only like 1:30. It really clicks with me. And it's nearly like my favorite track off of Headspace. I think I've shared this in the past.
The interlude is such an art form. It's such an art because it can either feel like a completely
throwaway,
pointless, like waste of like a minute and a half that's just sort of like tossed into an album.
It doesn't add any layers. Or it can be like
one of the most integral aspects of the entire record.
And that applies to Out of the Blue. Less so to No Feelings Is Final, but I did enjoy that track. Featuring Aether. I think the roughest run on this album for me is Dope Sick featuring Finn Power of Stone, and then Down featuring Malevolence.
Neither just connect with you, really. I prefer Dope Sick over Down, but I guess I do agree with you that neither really.
If there's a lull on this album, I think it's with those 2 tracks for me.
Now that you mention it, I think I'm a little hot and cold with this album in general because it does feel a little bit of a roller coaster in a sense that like it really peaks for me and then it comes all the way back down and levels out, like because we get that really hot start like you said, and then we hit Self Hell and it's like okay, and then we get this really like
kind of mid.
I really like Wildfire, so I'm gonna strongly disagree with you on that one, because I think then we get like Wildfire, No Feelings, and then Dope Sick, but then we just kind of like level out on Down personally, and then ultimately I feel like we get like To the Flowers, Out of the Blue. And then like Enemy Mentality and Radical Hatred, Radical Love also don't like
really like
overwhelm me. So I do think this album has peaks.
Instrumentally, really enjoy Enemy Mentality. Just some crushing moments on that track. And then Radical Hatred, Radical Love. It's not my favorite track on this album, but I did like it. It's not the powerful
closer that I was hoping for, especially looking at the title. It just feels like it's going to be like sort of this like, it just feel like it had like an immenseness to it that I just feel like did not end up being the song that I heard.
Interesting that we're not fully aligned because like Dope Sick does not work for me. Wildfire does not work for me.
Yeah.
For first impressions.
I guess ultimately, I think I kind of walk away from this album feeling like it's one of the more exciting releases from While She Sleeps, and I like that they're out here taking chances this deep into their career. I think this band is right to shake things up.
I think this one immediately clicks with me way more than Sleep Society did out the gates.
It's just a lot more exciting. So even if I were to go back and Sleep Society maybe is slightly more consistent, I don't think it has nearly the level of like peaks that this album has, and it's just not as exciting, and it just didn't pull like the emotions that I have talking about this record. I mean, like I didn't have the same excitement to discuss that record that I had to discuss this record. Now overall I would probably settle on like somewhere between like a 7 and a 7.5 here, where again I think we have some like incredible moments on here, maybe some of the best in While She Sleeps discography period, like you said. But then I also think that we have some moments where something like Self Hell, where we try something, but
the song,
we don't really knock it out of the park. Like I appreciate the effort. I just like I don't feel like it was a success, at least in terms of like my enjoyment. And then again, like I think coming after Out of the Blue, Enemy Mentality and Radical Hatred, Radical Love just felt a little underwhelming. And so it sort of ends the album off on a really soft note for me. It doesn't sort of like send me away with like the most like the strongest emotional feeling that I could have had.
What would you rate it?
Like I said, like, I think I'd rate it like a 7.5 because I think its highs are immensely high. I just think it's weighed down a little bit by a few tracks that weren't nearly as exciting by comparison.
There's not a valley between us, but a slightly different score. I probably come at this one with like an 8.5 out of 10. There are, I don't know, the impressive moments on this record really stick with me, and they super outshine or they almost distract me from some of the cons on this record. So like, I don't know if I'm blinded by love or something.
The record I always think of when we have this discussion is Eternal Blue by Spirit Box, where I think of like the 5 songs on that album that were absolutely life-changing, that the other 5 songs on that album could have been complete silence and I would have been entirely fine with it, because it's like, if my favorite songs are on this album, who cares what other songs are on alongside of it? And that's almost where I'm at with songs like To the Flowers and Out of the Blue and sorry, Leave Me Alone. Yeah. Where they're so strong. They're so strong where it like it forgives some of the mistakes. Not all of them for me personally, but some of them.
And then Peace of Mind for me is definitely up there. And then let us know in the YouTube comments and on the Discord and on the Patreon what you guys think of this album. I'm really curious to see what the 6 has to say about this one.
Oh, yeah, curious how divisive this one is.
I peeked at like some r/metalcore stuff, not like the day of album discussion.
You took a look at the discourse?
But like some of the quotes we talked about earlier, r/metalcore was not taking well at the time that they were released. So, or obviously they were also not taking some of the songs that were released, like Self Hell, that well.
To be fair, I'm not entirely completely different from their feeling in that sense. And I know what it's like to see your band talk about their band and
experience heartbreak. Yeah.
Right. Like is scary when you're a certain age.
Totally. We're going to move on and discuss Heaven and Hell by Sum 41.
You just did it for the dopamine. You didn't mean to leave me so fucked up. You did it for the dopamine. It couldn't be that I'm just not enough.
This is the Ontario, Canada Outfit's 8th and final studio album.
This is it.
That's it.
This is it.
It was released the 29th of March via Rise Records, their first and only release on said label following their departure from Hopeless in 2023.
It's very interesting to see a band like go and sign a contract to be like, hey, I want to put up my last album. Are you with me on this one?
At that point, just do it independently.
No, I mean, when you're someone like Sum 41, I think that you're probably moving enough units where you need a certain large body behind you to help you like facilitate that.
Yeah.
Like obviously when you're smaller, it's much easier.
Yep. All right. So Heaven and Hell consists of 20 tracks. It's a double album, right? So it's split down the middle into 2 discs. The first disc, Heaven, consists of 10 tracks, and they feature a return to the band's pop punk stylings from the band's early career, right? That's what
the Sum 41 we all like embraced in like their inception.
The one we close our eyes and think of. While disc number 2, Hell, is a continuation of Sum 41's most recent heavy metal stylings as well. Which we experienced most recently on 2019's Order in Decline LP, which we did review at the time on this show, but I'm struggling to remember.
Such a vague memory of it.
I don't think I hated it.
Let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Has Spotify ruined the concept of a double album?
Yes.
Right?
Actually, yes.
Yeah, because I went to check this out on Spotify and it was like Heaven X Hell, 1 20-track album.
Right. Like,
not at all 2 different experiences. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this band does nothing to like layer in any sort of like I think that conceptually maybe they could have approached it in a way that felt like there was a level of separation other than just like, hey, this one's more metal and this one's he's a little metal and she's a little pop punk. But they do nothing like that. So it's like you really have to draw that line yourself and be like, okay, these 10 tracks were the first one and these 10 tracks are the next one. Know this inherently.
You're not wrong in that the streaming age really has it's ruined the double album experience.
At the very least, if you're not going to do anything on the band side to try to establish that in any capacity, right?
Yeah. Favorite double albums?
Favorite double albums would have to be Say Anything's in Defense of the Genre comes to mind as my number one. I honestly can't think of many other double albums besides
Really? There's a big one that comes to mind.
There's a big one? Okay, hold on. Can I get a genre?
For us, and well, I mean, big for us, metalcore. Jen.
Periphery?
Juggernaut.
Alpha Omega?
Yeah. Alpha
Okay.
Omega.
But they're few
Juggernaut.
and far between, right? At the very least, ones we've listened to. Like this feels
They
like
used
a
to be
lost art
super
form.
common. And again, like streaming age has really ruined it because you also have
Used to be
like
more common. I don't know about extremely common feels.
extremely common.
Feels excessive. Like that I can only think of two in like the history of like my music listening.
Shut the fuck up. Shut the
There
fuck up.
wasn't like 25 of that back in 2004.
But it's such it's one of like my favorite ideas that exists
Conceptually,
in music. Also has been ruined by the fact that like albums in general are just like 20 songs long now. Like think of every hip hop album that's come out.
That's okay.
Outside of the scene.
From the hip hop end.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I
So
know
now
what
you have
mean.
like 40-minute listening experiences that are 24 tracks long, and it's like, huh?
You're right. The idea of the double album has been completely eliminated by streaming. So it's curious that Sum 41 would choose to go this route, right? In some
Well, we
capacity?
get sort of into
Get
that
into it.
a little
Get the
bit.
fuck into it.
A timeline of events. That's what I want to share with you,
Let's talk
Sam.
about it.
March 23rd, 2022. So rewind it 2 years. Almost to the date. Jesus. The band announced the album and its musical styles. Vocalist Derek Whibley described it as somewhat of a nod to Black Sabbath, referring to that band's album of the same name.
Notorious pop punk band for those who don't know.
Were you aware of that?
Not at all.
So I really enjoy some of this next.
but I don't know shit about Black Sabbath. So like
It was actually a little fun fucking digging into Wikipedia and learning a little bit of Black Sabbath info because I was not aware
you
either.
dusted up on your Black Sabbath?
A little bit.
Who's the vocalist for Black Sabbath?
They had like 4 or 5. I didn't know that. I thought it was just the one
It was
guy.
Ozzy.
Fucking Oz.
It was Ozzy.
Yeah.
They had
well,
more?
you'll find out. So
This is the fun when I found out there was a 5th member of Fall Out Boy. It blew my fucking mind. We'll get into it later.
What? Obviously, we know the record. This is all quotes from Derek again.
Yeah.
Obviously, we know the record and love the record. Some of us. And we knew that, calling it this was, we kind of looked at it as, well, you know what? They've had it for like about 42 years. We'll take it from here, which is such a fun idea. It's almost like a band 30 years from now being like, yeah, Sempiternal belongs to us now.
It's our turn.
Imminence just did it to Ask Alexandria. They're like, the Black? Yeah, we'll take that.
I imagine like 20 years from now, my kid coming up to me and being like, yeah, this new record. I don't have a kid right now currently, but like this is all theoretical. And they're like, yeah, because my favorite band is releasing new album. It's called Sempiternal. And I was like, get this fucking shit out of the house. You know what I mean? It's the most disrespectful shit I've ever seen in my whole life,
So some actual context.
Yeah, this album's called The Black Parade. The fuck it is.
For those unaware, Black Sabbath's Heaven and Hell was the band's 9th studio album.
I better be dead before somebody releases an album called The Black Parade.
I was a little disappointed to learn it wasn't also their 8th studio album in the same way that it is Sum 41's 8th studio album. But besides that,
Yeah.
It was released way back in 1980, so now it's about 44 years old.
Fuck, man, everyone's dead from that now. So
It was the first. Well, careful, because we're getting into some of that.
I didn't mean it incredibly disrespectfully, as it'll come across quickly.
It was the first to feature vocalist Ronnie James Dio following Ozzy Osbourne's departure in 1979.
This is Ronnie James Dio, right? This is like his thing. Like,
I think so.
yeah.
You know more about him than I did.
I know that Killswitch Engage covered a song for him and it went like fucking multi-platinum.
Damn. Okay. Shit. End of Heartache.
It's not in Heartache, no. This band was called
Ronnie-
The End of Heartache. Literally leave my house. Disgraceful child.
Ronnie, the new vocalist of fucking Black Sabbath, would release 3 albums with the band, and much later, in 2006, a variation of that post-Ozzy lineup reunited under a new band name,
Sacrilege.
Heaven and Hell, in order to tour Dio-era Black Sabbath material without fans expecting to hear all of the Ozzy period classics. Like, can you name some?
War. War drum. War
All
is
right,
never
sit this one out,
ending.
boss. I didn't write them down. I think like fucking Iron Man or some shit. Sandman. I
Yeah,
don't
that
know.
checks out. I remember in when I took in my 6th grade
Music 101.
No, shut up. In my 6th grade music class, we had to like bring our favorite song to class, and somebody chose Iron Man by Black Sabbath. I remember that. And they like played the song and they had to read an essay on it. Do you know what I chose?
No.
All Star by Smash Mouth.
So fucking good. So good. I hated fucking quick tangent. Fucking music class. I think I've told this story on the show before, but I did the same thing in like one of my music classes in high school, or no, this was like elementary school, 4th grade or 3rd grade, some shit like that.
This was
And it's like
during Marcus's lifetime in school.
it was like bring in a CD and play like one of your favorite tracks, but it can't have any fucking swear words or any shit like
Obviously,
that.
that's a given. That's a given.
And I was like, okay, cool. Sam, can I borrow the Matches CD?
Shut the fuck up. What did you bring in?
I brought in Decomposer. I think I played Salty Eyes, which is like the entire course is just like saying the word shit. And I remember like walking up to the teacher like halfway through the song being like, what? I didn't know. I've never heard that, but like this must be like the uncensored version.
That's the uncut, longer, uncensored. Yeah,
Right. I don't think she believed me at all. I didn't fuck with that teacher though. Fuck her.
Marcus dropped out
Of elementary school.
He's a podcaster now.
Yeah, you could tell I dropped out.
Things work out. So like,
Damn.
drop out of school. Who needs it?
In 2009, Heaven and Hell, the band, released their first and only album, The Devil You Know, before disbanding following Ronnie James Dio's death in 2010 due to stomach cancer.
Sad.
And that's where all the fucking Black Sabbath stuff information here comes to an end. On May 8th, 2023, still on the timeline of events here, the band announced that they would be disbanding after releasing the album and subsequently touring in support of it throughout 2024.
They started a fucking trend with this shit, by the way. No, they didn't. You know who did? You know who started a fucking trend
Who?
with this shit? Fucking Brendan Urie's ass, where he was like, Final Panic at the Disco Tour. See us now or never again. This announcing you're going to break up.
I think a lot of people chose Never Again.
Yeah, sure, especially for that album that he dropped. But like, how do you feel about this thing that like is sort of feels like a thing now, where it's like Panic at the Disco is like, hey, last tour ever, we're disbanding. Sum 41, Yumi at 6, the very top of this year.
I am not liking this current pattern or trend, whatever you want to call it, because it is like there's a finality to a lot of this stuff that I am not getting like anything out of myself personally.
And it definitely feels a lot more cemented when it's a band like Sum 41 who's clearly been around like 30 years at this point.
Derek's had a couple of like health issues.
Right.
Things like that.
So this one feels the most real of them all. Like, you know, we talk about this a lot. Like, you see Brendan Urie running it back in a couple of years. You can see Yumi at 6 like 3 years from now doing the big reunion tour. Right.
Who would have thought?
But Sum 41
in the same room together?
Nah, in terms of at the very least releasing music, this feels like it might very well be the end.
I still maintain to this day that it's Under Oath who popularized getting back together as a band.
Under Oath did popularize reunions, yes.
At least within this scene, it's like, damn, you guys went for like, everyone saw that they went away for like 3 years and suddenly were like, everyone wanted to tour with them again. Their music was already like, the reception of that music was better.
Miss us. Yeah.
Right.
Miss us. You create this longing sensation, and then when people finally have you back, they're actually excited again. That it's not going to work for everybody, but when it fucking
Bring
pays
back
off,
a
it pays
core
off.
member. Yeah.
Yep.
Let's see here. Derek kind of had some more to say. The band had some more to say here. Being in Sum 41 since 1996 brought us some of the best moments of our lives. We are forever grateful to our fans, both old and new, who have supported us in every way. It is hard to articulate the love and respect we have for all of you, and we wanted you to hear this from us first. It's such a fucking sit down, I'm breaking up with you energy.
No way it didn't leak.
Sum 41 will be disbanding. This is all the statement that they released on Instagram announcing this breakup. We will still be finishing all of our upcoming tour dates this year, and we're looking forward to releasing our final album, Heaven and Hell. Per an interview with Rolling Stone, it was at the height of the pandemic and for the first time, Derek Whibley was just trying to relax. Mostly, he was focused on his other gig outside of the band, being a first-time dad.
So we can also blame the pandemic for a lot of this shit because it opened a lot of bands' eyes to the lifestyle that you could live when you're not constantly touring, which has been like a net negative for the music scene as a whole. Cost us artists, cost us bands.
I can shower daily.
Yeah.
Right.
I get to see my family.
Right.
Right.
I don't have to go to a gas station to gain sustenance every day.
Right. It's almost like we needed bands to live in this like cloudy sort of like foggy existence and not realize like what they could be doing because it's like obviously been bad for us.
Again, also, I love that it is 2024 and we are still getting fucking pandemic inspired music.
Like, listen, as we should. Like that is a life-changing fucking experience.
It's going to be in the history books.
Right. Like that's not just a thing that happened. That was like a cataclysmic event like of this century. Like it's going to have an effect, you know? It cost us some 41.
and Panic at the Disco. Wow. With firm lockdown in place, the only way for Whibley and his wife Ari to get out of the house was to put their newborn in the car seat and drive around LA for hours on end. Which is such a funny thing to say because it's like, were they just trying to like go someplace down the street like a mile away? And that's still how long that takes.
It's my understanding that like LA is an incredibly non-driver friendly city. So it's like you might as well just get on that highway and get cozy for an hour if you want to go 10 minutes from your home.
Exactly. For many of those rides, Whibley would curate special playlists to entertain their baby. And this is part of the reason why I included this quote, just because it adds so much context to why this record exists.
By all means.
One of those playlists was filled with all of the punk rock stuff I listened to when I was in high school that I hadn't listened to in years. Listening to this music kickstarted me into writing again, right? It was also around this time that Universal hit up Whibley asking if he had any vault tracks to feature on a possible 20th anniversary reissue of the group's iconic 2001 LP, All Killer No Filler. Derek didn't, he explains. So instead, he offered to write a few tracks in the same style that birthed now classics like Fat Lip and In Too Deep, you know, these songs that we all associate immediately with Sum 41 in our head.
Yep.
He goes on, once I had about 4 or 5 songs, I was like, you know what? I like all these. I'm not giving these to anybody.
Love that energy.
Combine the baby car rides, soundtracked by bands like NoFX, Pennywise, Good Riddance, with the Old Killer No Filler anniversary, and Whibley was in a full early 2000s pop punk mood. I wasn't really trying to start a record, he admits.
You know, this is fascinating in a sense that you are right. It truly does put so much of this album into context. Hearing this, it may end up being incredibly relevant to how I overall score this album, knowing what the intentions were overall.
Interesting. 10 out of 10.
Because I think it's molding a little bit my approach to what I thought this album was versus what I'm now learning actually was.
Right.
Marks, I'm getting a little antsy. Let me jump in here.
Mm-hmm.
He explains that during the pandemic, a lot of other people were retreating into things that made them feel good in the past, and that he did the same in bringing back Sum 41's original pop punk sound. There's some weird nostalgia that kicked in because of the pandemic, he said, and it all made sense to me why pop punk is coming back. It's feel-good music. There's something that's happy about it, something young and innocent and free. It's a good point that I never actually really considered that. Not only did pop punk just sort of like randomly regain its sort of like stranglehold on pop culture, but it did so because there is something very almost like vapid, shallow, and in a sense cotton candy like about it, that it's consumable and you don't really have to think too hard about it.
Small aside, I was thinking, so for the real SOTS sickos out there, they'll know that when this show first started, even back under the fucking Sam and Marcos and music name, our whole shtick was that we despised pop punk with every fucking bone in our body.
Yeah.
And it's so funny to think back on that time because I don't know what the catalyst for that was, because when I think back to my youth, when I was a little baby child, songs like In Too Deep and Fat Lip, fucking All Star were some of my favorite songs ever. Fucking Jimmy Eat World's music.
It's Culture Wars. Because there was a real divide within the scene about like this stupid fun end that was metalcore and this more serious real music that was like that era of pop punk.
Trying to pinpoint when it happened though, is like, because pop punk had a lot of fun music,
and it was like
but I remember that being why I didn't like
the
it.
defend pop punk or the defend metalcore. Like it was very like this idea that you could be one or the other. Like really only played when everybody was in agreement that A Day to Remember was good.
So
otherwise, you were picking your sides. Yeah, that was right. In the lightest sense imaginable, it was precisely that.
I wish I could pinpoint like the exact moment it happened though, because like again, like
Man
it's
Overboard,
so funny,
right? Or the Wonder Years,
the Messengers.
Like
it has
Absolute
to be,
Punk telling you every metalcore album was
that's
ass,
what it is,
and every pop punk album was great. It made you feel antagonistic towards them.
You've unfogged my memory because that is exactly what it was. It was seeing fucking Absolute Punk give The Emptiness in 2009, which is like my favorite album ever at the time, get like a fucking a 2.5 rating.
Right.
And then like
and the Wonder Years got like a 9.9. Yeah.
Right. The Messengers 10 out of 10. This is the band of your life. Like you're never going to hear anything better. God.
Bring Me the Horizon. This is trash.
All that hate is fucking running through my veins again.
The Graduate is the best album you're ever going to hear in your life. Like it was just
The Graduate
it was the same
were
thing.
okay.
I did like The Graduate, but I ended up also liking all the bands that I thought I hated as well. So it's like
back on track here.
Whibley's lyrics on the album stem from personal experience. The hell side works through the anxieties and confusion he's faced in his life, especially during the pandemic. Quote, some of the metal stuff comes with a lot of anger from people who have stolen from me and hurt me in the past, Whibley says, referring to past relationships and former business partners. Some of the lyrics even are directed towards a former manager who stole lots of money and was mentally abusive to Whibley and Sum 41. We got to figure out what's going on with managers stealing money, because I feel like I hear this once every like 3 months about a manager, like whether it's music or like some other sort of artist being like, yeah, they were skimming off the top. And it's like, what the fuck? Like, why are these all fucking trash people who seem to like get attracted? Not all of them, but you know, a lot of them seem to be attracted to this position. Yeah. Marcus on the new album, vocalist Eric Whibley says, quote, once I heard the music, I was confident enough to say, this is the record I'd like to go out on. We've made a double album of pop punk and metal, and it makes sense. It took a long time for us to pave this lane for ourselves, but we did, and it's unique to us.
That's got to be such an interesting moment in a musician's career where it's only been that one band of theirs to sort of sit and reflect on what they've just heard and be like, I'm fine with that being it. And it can't have happened much, at least within our scene. Like, I can't really think of many times that someone has outright announced their final album. Like, even the ones that did come back. I expect Sum 41 to come back someday too, but I really wish I was a fly on the wall in a moment like that.
I think maybe there's a little bit of a luxury of that opportunity even being on the table, you know? Maybe there were a lot of bands who
not wrong,
dropped 4 more albums than they actually wanted to make because they need to pay their bills. This is their career, this is their profession, you know what I mean? But I think it's also why you see a lot of bands change up their style, right? Because they're a little tired of doing the same thing and they want to try something different. And they're forced to do it under the moniker that's going to attract the most attention, even if it's not necessarily the same vibe of what they've been doing. Finally, Marcus, leading up to its release, the band dropped 3 singles, Landmines, Dopamine, and Waiting on a Twist of Fate, which belong to the heaven side, while the other single, Rise Up, belongs to hell. So clearly,
I wanted to include that tidbit because I'm
more confidence in the heaven side of this release.
More confidence in the excitement, the hype that those tracks would bring leading up to this album. I would guess that's my intuition there.
Well, I guess after all of this, I feel a little bit like the hell side of this album feels like an afterthought. I just and this could have been something that maybe you didn't include, and maybe it was in another interview, and we just didn't capture it, but I get this impression that like he's reliving his old pop punk he's writing these songs and realizing that he actually
there
really
were definitely
likes them.
quotes,
but I don't get any of that from the metal side, except for the naming convention of the whole thing.
I didn't think there was as much to chew on as some of those.
Okay, but
on
there
some
was
of those
a
quotes.
little bit of something, and it's just not included here.
Well, it was. I mean, realistically, the energy in those quotes was that we still just really liked this side that we were currently cultivating, exploring. I mean, you got it in like that last tidbit where it's like, hey, not a lot of bands have really carved a path where like they have two very distinct styles that at least they enjoy writing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But you're not wrong in the sense that like Hell feels like an afterthought almost for a couple of reasons, in that like this album isn't really split down the middle streaming wise. They're not separated into two separate things. It's just the continuation of Heaven. And for a lot of reasons, like it does start to feel like an afterthought, especially when you have songs like, you know, Paint It Black, which is just a Rolling Stones cover that is floated around in like their live performance for a number of years prior to finally getting placement on this album. But like having a cover at all on the Hell side feels a little
like we're trying to like fluff out the numbers,
fill
a little
out
bit.
what we can. Like
Though
we wanted like an
you
even
add in the
10.
context that they've been playing it a lot makes me think that maybe there's a little bit more attachment to that song than I naturally would have thought, even though I tend to look at a cover in the same way and think to myself like, we should have filled this track listing out with an original track. But
Yeah.
I guess if there's any point in your career where you can just kind of do whatever you want, it's when you're just dropping your last album.
100%. I mean, same with like a track like Johnny Libertine, though, which some info I gathered from the YouTube comments, which I thought was pretty interesting, is that it was a track that has also been floating around for, maybe not floating around, but it's been out there in the sense that
Been in the vault.
This was a song that was apparently worked on initially for 2007's Underclass Hero. Didn't make the cut. Reworked again on 2016's 13 Voices. Did not make the cut. And finally getting a release all these years later, which I thought was just sort of fascinating. So like this band talks about going all the way back to a certain era, but like there's songs on here like that Paint It Black cover and Johnny Libertine that have existed in certain eras of this band already that still found their home on this record. Again, just something I found sort of interesting. I wanted to include that. Heaven is definitely, it's the show stealer here for me. And I don't know how much of that is just suddenly I really, really enjoy this sound.
You prefer this side of the band.
Yeah. But I mean, Hell's not all that bad. I really like the 1-2 punch of fuck me. Preparacy Salier. I don't know what the fuck that is. And Rise Up. It's probably Rise Up in like French. I don't care. I don't need a correction anywhere in the comments. I really think that intro into Rise Up really puts it over the edge. Like Rise Up as a single didn't click for me. And then I hear it with like that 120 minute of build up into Rise Up. And I'm like, hey, this is kind of neat. And I'm not really feeling a ton more on the rest of Hell. There's some good tracks, some good moments. It's All Me was good. Nice course on that one. But I think all the again, the show stealers are absolutely on the Heaven side. Really enjoy, Radio Silence, for example. Dopamine, another single. Landmines, another single I enjoyed. Time Won't Wait is solid. There was a surprising amount here that I really did enjoy.
Do you think that speaks to the intention of this record, which is almost to split the eras of this band so that you would be able to enjoy your preference?
Probably.
And your preference is simply
if you go to this band's
Heaven
website,
side, the pop punk side of this band.
Yeah, if you go to this band's website, it's you're greeted immediately with the message of choose what you prefer. It's like, would you rather go the Heaven route or the Hell route?
Novel marketing,
you have to you have to choose that.
Which
there's
way,
a fork in the
Western
road,
man,
right?
yes.
And I thought that was, obviously it's marketing, but also in a sense like that is the intention of this album, I think, as a whole anyway.
Yeah, and so, all right, before you provided all of this context, here was my thought coming into this. I was a little jaded because I felt like this band did a good job of, with this record, almost like encasing themselves, like in a way that captured their spirit from the years of this project, so that you could almost listen to this album and experience whatever era of Sum 41, like just like it was at that time, right? Like there's no experimentation on this album. There's no swings. No. There's nothing out of the ordinary. There almost feels like there's no context that could almost even set it within a period of time. Like the songs are written in a general sense that like their emotions and the overall context is that, so you could listen to them at any point in your life, or
these are songs you could have already heard.
There's a lot of that feeling.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, this is the Sum 41 I remember, or this is exactly how I remember Sum 41. And it's even sometimes in really bizarre ways to me. It's almost like I feel like I'm listening to a song that's written from the perspective of a teenager, but I know in the back of my mind it's written from the perspective of like a 45-year-old man. And I'm sitting there and I'm listening to that song and I'm thinking to myself, like, it's like, you know, you get these types of lyrics that it's like life is hard and all these other things, but it's like the cadence and then the like general sentimentality of them feel as if they are quite honestly written by this band from like 2003 or something. And it's such a bizarre feeling. And it's not something that I necessarily want to hold against this band, because I feel like I gave Blink-182 a lot of credit for doing that exact same thing, even though it is almost identical to what this band is accomplishing here, where it sounds overly familiar. It's almost nostalgia baiting at times. It's quite honestly, it is nostalgia baiting, right? So I don't necessarily want to criticize.
I don't think it's as like perverse as you're
making it out to be. I think it is in some
statement.
instances, because I feel like even some of the riffs make me have this moment where I feel like, if I heard this before, this sounds like almost identical to something. And it does feel in a way that like Sum 41 really is just sort of like a rewriting old songs with like, and giving them like a fresh coat of paint. But it's like, there's nothing truly new about this. Like it really does feel like a song that was rewritten to be included on an album that was going to be reissued. So it's incredible to get that context. But one thing I want to add is that the sticking point for me really, and maybe this is what separates them from Blink-182, is that Sum 41 has gone out of their way to establish a finality with this record that I don't think exists within this record. Which is to say that I don't feel any of the weight of this being Sum 41's final album. The only way that I know is because I've been told. But nothing about it feels like the powerful final closing chapter in a band's career. It just feels like a compilation of songs that do a good job of painting what Sum 41 was and is. But I thought this album would have some sort of emotional heft to it that I think it is just completely missing.
You're not wrong, because I remember going into that final track and thinking to myself, okay. I paused it and I'm like, this is it. You know, not that I've been like a diehard Sum 41 fan all my life, but you know, how the end begins.
Build up, like this marketing has worked on this, right?
So like in my head, I'm like, you're not wrong. Like for the entirety up until this point, I'm like, all right, well, it's weird hearing a fucking Rolling Stones cover and thinking like, this is it.
Mm-hmm.
But like you get to that final track and in your mind, you're like, okay, last Sum 41 song I'll ever hear. And it ends and I'm like, well, I wasn't like moved to tears, and I didn't really have any emotions around that track specifically at all.
But I don't.
It's like, okay,
I don't think this band does anything to try to elicit that from you. Like I think they do nothing to try to elicit that from you. I think I don't want to say they play it safe. I think they set out to do exactly what they wanted to do, and that they almost created a narrative around this that ends up making it feel underwhelming. And I guess you can certainly hold the band accountable for that, but you know, obviously, like I said, I
don't
changed my frame of mind a little bit with some of the context you provided prior to this, because knowing how the band approached it has it make more sense to me. But I think that when I went into this album, I was hoping for a completely different experience than the one that I got.
I guess immediately I forget if I included or not the quote where Derek says, like, you know, when I finished this album, I just sort of like, I sat back and I was like, I can go out on this. I think we did include it.
You did include that. And like,
so I don't think it was really written with that finality in mind. It was more of like a, you know what? We did good.
Yeah, like
let's call it a fucking 30-year career and move on with our lives.
And I get that, but like you got to think back to like when this band was talking about like, hey, this is a double album. This is the last thing we're ever gonna do. Like this is the fucking. You got the pop.
You're not
side,
wrong.
you got the
Some of that
metal
marketing,
side. It
undermines.
It worked,
right.
but it almost worked too well because what I ended up getting was like a greatest hits compilation that reminds me of why I enjoy this band, but does not do anything to like conclude their story in any sort of like resounding way. It just it ends up feeling like a whimper to me in a way that's frustrating, even though I don't think both of these albums are bad in any capacity. I just think they're okay. They're enjoyable. They're not a bad send-off, but they're not I don't think it is the final like trophy on the career defining like think about like when a QB wins a Super Bowl and then they just like call it, like they just fucking go out on top, like you can't even challenge my record. Like last game ever that I played was the fucking Super Bowl.
Yeah, this wasn't much of a championship parade either.
This feels like going out first round in the playoffs and being like, we did it, boys. This has been it. This has been sub 41. It's just like, it feels soft. It's just like there's no heft to this. And in that sense, it's incredibly disappointing. And ultimately, I think I give this like a 6 out of 10. You are 100% correct. It is heavily, heavily held up by its pop punk side. Yes. And the metal side, by not being overtly disappointing and being just okay, manages to not really sully the experience. But when I'm listening to this,
there's some dead weight there.
20-track experience, it loses my attention in the back half of this record because it simply is not powerful enough.
I probably land at a 6.5. I think I'm slightly higher.
You're just in a kinder mood than I am today.
I guess so.
You're just feeling a little bit more. You want sub 41.
You make it sound like I
were kinder to them.
You make it sound, yeah, but you make it sound like I threw while she sleeps a bone. We'll see. Yeah, I don't know. That was some 41. Let us know.
But like literally. That was some 41, y'all. Like you'll be able to catch them on tour, right? Like they're touring like through into 2025.
Yeah, hey, Sum 41 final tour began on January 12th, 2024 at the Uptown Park in Jakarta, Indonesia.
Yeah.
And is set to end at the Scotiabank Arena in Toronto, Ontario, again where this band is based out of Canada, with back-to-back dates on Tuesday, January 28th and Thursday, January 30th. 2025.
You got to think the merch sales from those 2 days alone are going to be enough for this band to retire off of. There's just going to be a shirt that says like I was at the last Sum 41 show ever, and they're going to sell 5K of them at $80 a pop. Let's move on, Marcos.
It's been a career. It's not over yet, but it's been a career. Let's move on.
It's kind of over. Let's talk about Half Living Things by Alpha Wolf. This is the Melbourne, Australia outfit's third studio album, arriving the 5th of April via Sharptone Records, which will be the Friday that you're listening to this. Half Living Things consists of 12 tracks and is the much anticipated follow-up to 2020's A Quiet Place to Die LP. Some quotes from the Half Living Things press release. On the album's essence, vocalist Loki had this to say, quote, "There can be no inner conflict without the constant tug-of-war between desire and disdain. The things you want versus the things you need, or the things that make you feel alive against the parts of it that do not. You cannot grow new parts without leaving the dead ones behind. You cannot be settled until you have truly known the opposite. Find out what makes you tick and just keep running around the clock until you're happy enough to die.
I like that little statement when you factor in that a song's whole chorus is like TikTok boom.
You're right. We're playing directly to the subject matter of this record. Find out what makes you tick and just keep running around the clock until you're happy enough to die is such a it's the kind of statement that's got you like reconsidering your life choices in some weird way. So it's like, am I fulfilling myself?
Right. It's like, is this something that they pulled from the Matrix?
This feels pointed in a way. Yes. You know what I mean? You cannot grow new parts without leaving the dead ones behind. So this album is all theoretically about growth, right? It's about washing your hands of the old you, making new choices moving forward. That's the vibe we're getting?
To me, it is, yeah.
Quote, "We never want to write the same album twice," explains guitarist Scotty Simpson. "Half Living Things is still heavy, but we're venturing into new territory." Metalcore fans bracing themselves right now. "Loki sounds like a force of nature on this too. We consider the live show more than ever, creating parts specifically for crowd involvement. These songs are built to ignite the stage. Half Living Things is still heavy, but we're venturing into new territory." Marcus, I'm actually a little baffled by this one because I do feel that ultimately on this record, and we'll get into it in a little bit, Alpha Wolf cannot overcome who they are on the inside. They simply cannot they are overpowered by their true selves on this record.
Overpowered.
They can say all they fucking want
by the wolf inside.
Right. But ultimately the true Alpha Wolf emerges not 2 tracks into this album and it never leaves. So I will say that if you were as a metalcore fan coming into this album and being like, all right, let's hope the homies stay true. Let's hope.
Wipe that sweat off your forehead right now.
Yeah. I assure you, Alpha Wolf stayed true to the cause. Scotty leaves off with this message. Quote, "We hope it connects. We're incredibly proud of this record. It's everything we want Alpha Wolf to be. These songs are heavy, but they're fun. Jam it in your car, show it to your friends, come out to a show."
You know how you said Alpha Wolf can't help who they are?
Yeah.
I also get that in some of the quotes that they supply, like the ones we just read here.
Yeah.
Because they're essentially they keep just circling back to the fact that Alpha Wolf is just supposed to be in your face. They're don't really overthink this one, people.
But it's funny because a lot of bands make those same comments because they know they're playing to an audience. They're trying to help satiate, at the very least with their words, the appetite they know a certain fan base of theirs has, right? So we see a lot of bands do this song and dance. They're like, don't worry, y'all. Still heavy. Still some of the most ignorant shit you've ever heard. Maybe one of the heaviest songs I've ever written on this album. I don't know.
Right.
And then you end up hearing the album and it's like, I don't know. You were kind of
lying.
I feel like you pulled one over on me. Yeah. Not at all the case with Alpha Wolf.
No.
This is the Alpha Wolf you've come to know. They are disgustingly heavy. It is the case for around exactly 12 tracks or 11 tracks of this album with their one token ballad, which they also had on the last album. This feels like Alpha Wolf experimenting a little. Yes. But more so than not working. They still try to find the things that people really like about them to begin with, which is incredibly in your face style of metalcore, style of lyricism, style of production.
They stay very true to the sound that they have established over the last album, the EP that came before that. Anything they've done with Loki, this sounds like an extension of that. And you're right, there is very clearly some experimentation here, but not to the point where anything sounds overtly out of place.
I would argue that in an instance where you feel like this band is taking a swing with the Ice-T feature, I actually think Ice-T feels right at home here.
Definitely.
In a way that does not make it stand out in any capacity, other than the fact that I think it's a really good choice in that sense, but it doesn't feel like one that's out of left field. It feels right at home. And then like, I remember we talked about Whenever You're Ready like a couple weeks back, right? And we were like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I like Bleed From Within a little better. Bleed From Within. Bleed For You. The ballad from the last album. And maybe this one doesn't quite connect. I think circling back and listening to this song again, it works great for me.
Super connects for me.
And it works great in this album. And it's a nice little like breather before you get into like 7 straight fucking ass beaters.
I mean, that's those are also my feelings around Sucks to Suck. I do not remember that song really clicking for me when it initially dropped.
I've been a diehard sucker. Since day one.
You're a real sucker.
That's correct. Day one.
And then on this album, I don't think the audiences have heard it yet. Haunter Sucks to Suck, Whenever You're Ready makes for probably my favorite 3 tracks. Like the 3-track 1, 2, 3 punch on this record, that's got to be it for me.
I don't know exactly what this band means when they say they're experimenting, but from the production end of like glossing up a song a little bit, glazing up a song a little bit, Haunter is it. Like,
yes.
Whatever little bit of spice they threw on that song elevates it above, for me personally, every other track on the album. For me, Haunter runs away with it. Favorite track by far.
Of course, the 69th Pokemon out of the original 151.
Is it actually number 69?
I'd love for it to be true. And then as long as we're, giving some context for song titles, Sam, A Terrible Day for Rain comes from Full Metal Alchemist. The Alchemist got a little teary-eyed that day that he learned he was full of metal. And he was a little frankly embarrassed.
I don't know if you're fucking with me anymore, if this is true. I don't know.
I'm definitely fucking with you. It is from Full Metal Alchemist, but I'm not going to spoil what it's about. I'm not going to give that context.
This has made it clear they fuck with anime a little bit. So, like, I don't know if this could have been
a little
dead
bit
on to me. What a weird swing on your end. What a weird.
That was a funny joke.
It was
Fuck
funny.
you.
It was all right. It was all right. It was funny. It was good. It was funny.
And then we get right into the heavy ones back to back to back. Fucking Pretty Boy Mangekyo. I don't know what that one is.
I'm gonna find out it's actually related to Full Metal Alchemist.
Yeah, maybe. No, Terrible Day for Rain is. It's like that fucking gift that goes around.
Are you fucking with me or are you not fucking with me? Now I don't know.
The fucking soldier who's fucking, this is like the fucking season finale of Full Metal Alchemist. I don't fully know, but I know it is from Full Metal Alchemist.
I've actually watched pretty much all of Full Metal Alchemist.
And he gets like all teary-eyed, and then he's like, brother, what a fucking terrible day for rain. It's clearly not raining, and the guy's just embarrassed he's crying.
What an incredible name for a song, then. What an incredible
That's all I'm
name for a
saying.
song. I love it.
Not that emotional of a song from like sonically.
It's just like, I really truly feel like there's not a lot to chew on here. Like, if you like the fucking distortion on your bass
respectfully
to fucking cripple your hearing the second this band like gets into it, it's nearly 11 tracks of that exact shit over and over again.
Pretty Boy Put Me on My Ass, fucking Double-Edged Demise puts you on your ass, fucking Half Living Things puts you on your, all of it puts you on your ass.
It's very satisfying in that sense. I will say that for me personally, I'm excited to see how this band really pushes the boundaries on the next album. But I think that for a project that's still pretty early in their career, to kind of stay in this level of like this like refinement stage.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna, this isn't like While She Sleeps. We're not 8 albums deep. I'm not gonna say, hey guys, maybe let's fucking shake up the formula a little bit, which, you know, they did in some ways. Alpha Wolf, a little bit less of the pushback on there. I think this band sort of like doubling down on what they do well, still in the perfect time frame of their career to be doing that.
Sure. Especially
when, you know, you go back and you look at that statement, we're talking about like songs that like, hey, what's going to ignite a fucking crowd? Like for a live show, that mentality plays, and I hear it on this album.
That's like one of my favorite, like when a band is purposefully driven to improve the live experience. And again, like Alpha Wolf's already a great live experience, but yeah, I remember Broco between albums, Automatic and Technology said like, we realized a lot of Automatic wasn't transitioning to the live setting as much as we hoped. So when we wrote Technology, the bulk of it was directly after playing a set and trying to feed off of the energy we just got from that crowd.
Just like Edward transmutes energy into Other Energy, if I remember
Edward
the
who?
premise of that show. Edward, the main character of Full Metal Alchemist.
Oh, I thought you were dropping a hard Twilight reference on my
I'm
head.
dropping a hard Twilight
reference, just a fucking
just out of left field right
an
here.
anvil of a
So that's
of a
ultimately where I
reference.
stand. It's like, this is an easy recommendation for me. I think this is like an 8 out of 10. I think that it may not have my favorite Alpha Wolf songs of all time. I'm going to be honest. Like, I don't think personally Akudama exists on this record, or a song that I think is as explosive as Akudama was, especially when I first heard it. But overall, I enjoyed my time with it. It achieves exactly what it set out for, and I think it nets Alpha Wolf a nice little banger that they can bring out on tour for a couple of years before they go back into the studio and start fucking around.
Definitely a more refined sound than the one we got on the last album, and for that purpose, I think it's a better one without, like you said, having higher peaks than that record did. Personally, for me, it doesn't affect my overall score. I come in slightly under you, by the way. What did you give it?
An 8.
I'm at a 7.5 on this one.
I will also, well, actually, I'm curious if maybe we end up having the same thing, and I just forgot to mention it.
Well, this part doesn't really affect my score, but I was slightly disappointed. Like you said, you didn't mind the refinement of the sound. I was a little bugged that there wasn't a little bit more experimentation on this one, in the sense that, like, you know, I did kind of want to see where this band would go, and we didn't really get a good indication on this album. Like, there's not even like a super out of left field song that like leaves me thinking like, oh, damn, there's a lot of room to explore with a sound like that on the next
I thought
album.
we'd get it with Ambivalence, and we didn't. Like, I'm looking at the closer on that album, and I'm thinking, all right, this is gonna be the one where we're gonna do something.
It's a longer
that's a little more
track.
abstract,
Yeah.
maybe, but it ends up being, you know, fairly straight ahead, I suppose. Not a bad song.
Good
Just,
chorus.
you know, you think that like bands
I
sort
like
of like
the-
set themselves up in a certain way to like, hey, we know this last track on the album is where we can do something a little bit more experimental. You see it happen a lot, and this just wasn't the case.
I like the continued like imagery of like butterflies in this band's sound, you know, lyrically and visually as well, of course, you know, damn near on album covers at this point and whatnot.
The
But,
overall
like,
tone, like the half living things, like the sort of like paint brush stroke that is sort of like implemented here, I like as well. I do feel like there is some level of like narrative cohesion here, or at least like thematic cohesion,
Yeah.
like you're saying. Yeah.
I guess ultimately where I land, and this is probably going to be words that bring relief to some of the fan base that we've already alluded to plenty of times and outright said earlier in this discussion, but like, this is an Alpha Wolf ass album, and for me that is personally slightly disappointing, but I still like Alpha Wolf, and getting an Alpha Wolf ass album from Alpha Wolf is still a good thing, but it's not exactly what I was looking for. Which is why, again, 7.5. It didn't completely rock my world. And
It's not
but
the
credit
most
to this
exciting
band.
conversation piece, but it
Yeah.
is extremely enjoyable to listen to.
Credit to this band. I see everything on here transitioning to the live setting extremely well. So as far as, you know, executing on a goal, bravo. You did what you set out to accomplish. Was I hoping for something a little meatier, something more to chew on? Personally, yes. But fans of this band are going to be all over this one. I'd be surprised if they weren't. Last, Sam, but certainly not least, we move on to the final album, of course, that we're discussing today, which is Cure by Erra. This is the Birmingham, Alabama outfit's 6th studio album, arriving the 5th of April via UNFD Records. Again, that is the Friday that you'll be listening to this review. It's still coming out. Cure consists of 12 tracks and is the much anticipated follow-up to 2021's self-titled LP, of course, by the name of Erra.
Mm-hmm.
It is the band's first studio release with guitarist Clint Tustin, following the departure of Sean Price, who exited the band back in March of 22. Clint was touring guitarist, promoted through the ranks.
I just had an incredibly funny thought. Whereas like gent guitarists have like the lifespan of like career athletes, where it's like by the time they're like 30, he's like he's too old for the league.
They play 11 seasons.
It's too much on the body. His fingers are completely fucked.
Right. God damn. Very sobering now.
Just hear them crack as he's plucking each of these strings.
It's also the band's first. This is like the most fascinating piece here that I really wanted to discuss, mainly because the producer that they collaborated with, I did not realize how much power they have gained recently. So again,
Hot new producer?
It's also maybe not even new. It's also the band's first time collaborating with producer Dan Bronstein, who has some pretty insane credits, Sam.
Like?
At this point, the last couple Dayseeker albums, 2 pretty big ones. I think literally everything by Spirit Box.
Okay.
Which is, again, one of the biggest metalcore bands in the scene at the moment. The last album from Silent Planet, I believe also the one before that. The last Volumes album, and just some last tidbits for the real SOTS sickos out there. Most of the solo material from Volumes vocalist Michael Barr, and the Los Angeles LP by Riley, including a couple of other tracks from Riley. So a ton of artists that we personally fucking
so literally all of my favorite fucking like releases of the last like 5 years.
But think of like why you love some of those releases so much. A lot of it's like the production being as fucking good as it is.
Especially with bands like Dayseeker.
Yeah.
Like I think about the production on a fucking Dayseeker
Hurt Wave
album.
too. A lot of collaboration there with Dan Bronstein.
Yeah. But I think the
here.
ones that really stuck out to me is like Los Angeles by Riley. Like thinking about an album like that and like the dichotomy between that and like something like this from Erra releases like Spirit Box Sound.
Yeah.
You know, the difference between metalcore and like sad boy emo hip hop.
Michael Barr right there though, like bridging everything.
Right. There's like a valley, but at the same time there are still like some bridges connecting them.
2 quotes I wanted to share, Sam, from the album's press release. Cure is the most groove-centric record we've ever made, explains guitarist/singer Jesse Cash.
Yeah.
The band's co-founder, chief songwriter. He's got every single fucking like pin and badge you can think of.
Yeah, he's beating every gym leader.
It's very rhythmically oriented. A lot of the technicality is in the right hand. It's in the right hand, Sam.
Mm-hmm.
With the riffs more so than it is in the left hand.
Nonsense. Speak to me. None of this means anything to me.
Ambidextrous
guys
people
who know
fucking...
absolutely. The riffs in the right hand or the left hand, like, bro,
he could be totally fucking with us, by the way, and
gone,
he could have switched hands.
Is
also,
this is somebody explaining to me what they just fixed in my car? I'm like, whatever. You
is
say,
he a lefty or a
say,
righty?
boss.
Like, how does that translate?
Yeah.
A little bit more. I found a cozy little spot in that heavy mood, and I leaned into it.
Sure.
A lot, Sam. You don't get into a metal band because you're trying to make it big. You get into it because you love it, Cash continues. We've always wanted to be the sort of band where you feel it in your gut that even if it takes time for your music to make an impact, there will be longevity because you're keeping it honest.
Love this quote.
There will always be an audience for that kind of honesty, no matter the size of it. That's our priority, knowing that we have our people, giving them what they want, and always expanding on that.
Let me explain it like a 5 for everybody. He says Erra is not selling out, and honest to God, I think that comes across in this album. For better or worse, I think Erra keep it fucking close to the vest. They keep it down to earth. They do not break from their integrity in any capacity. This is a bona fide Erra album.
It did connect a couple of dots for me personally, in that it made me realize that while an extremely technical band over the course of their career, going all the way back to the fucking Augment days, Erra's never really been a flashy band. And
you're literally pulling the words out of my mouth, because I've had this exact thought banked for this review.
Well, but the reason I bring this up is that has always been for me leading up to this record a detriment to this
literally
band?
mimicking them. It's scary to me how identical our taste is in a way that like I don't know.
It's almost like we've been
maybe detrimental to the show.
fucking echo
Because
chamber
I
in
thought the
here.
exact same thing, you know, and you know what really like painted a clear picture of it for me was that tour we saw with them last year, where it's like you have my two favorite bands of all time, like quite possibly, and I
Right.
See Stars and Bad Omens.
Sandwiched in between those is Erra.
Right. And those two bands are the pinnacle of flashy, the pinnacle of like a show stealing moment, a melody you'll never like the pause and then the breakdown, you know, the flashiness of it, the presentation, the aesthetic, all of it. And then you've got Erra. And Erra keeps it classy.
Blue collar.
Yeah, the like buttons up every single time. Like we just put our cap on. We're just like anybody else. We're up here playing metal.
Pull
Like,
our sleeves up.
you're not going to see them up there in a massive windbreaker and a chain like with flashing. I mean, some flashing lights, sure,
I've
but
never.
they're not that's not how they carry themselves in any way. They're not trend chasers. They're not trend chasers.
And I've never.
They're also not trendsetters for what it's worth either.
No, not quite. I wouldn't call them that. And I've never resented them for that.
But you know
lack
where
of
your tastes
flashiness.
align.
Exactly.
Right. So you don't want to go out of your way to be like, yeah, I don't like Erra. You walk away from maybe an Erra album and it's like, well, I like this one, but then this one, it's like, it doesn't have the same appeal that my taste is like derived from.
So for that reason, like it's taken me a while to sort of warm up to Erra, but I like that they've sort of forced our hand into meeting them on their own terms.
They spoke it into existence, right? This exact quote.
Because now over the
when
years,
we're talking about, you know, staying consistent to what it is you want to do, and people will appreciate it overall. And you're right. It's almost like I've been weathered down.
Well, you sound so
Erra
fucking broken.
Erra has like, well, I mean, in a sense, yes. I think Erra has broken me of what might be a staticness in some of my taste in a way that I think a lot of bands have broken me of that. And they've allowed me to expand on what I appreciate so that I can enjoy more styles of not only metalcore, but music in general.
Yeah.
And I'm not always just chasing the same thing. Like they've broadened my horizon.
Well, so what I'll tell you is it hasn't just been Erra.
Right. Yeah.
So no. So the angle I'm taking here is that like,
I see where you're going. Go ahead.
I liked the self-titled like more than I'd liked, you know, Drift, the album that came before that.
Divisionary all-time banger.
Yeah, like Scorpion Hymn. Like there were tracks on there that I walked away from really digging. And then like that deluxe comes out and there's even more on there that I'm chewing.
Maybe appreciate a cover, which I rarely do now. Right.
Yeah. But it really wasn't for me with Erra. And this is all like recently developed stuff.
I know exactly where you're going with this.
That Texas in July comeback EP, Without Reason.
Mm-hmm.
And then Ghost Atlas, which is Jesse Cash's solo project, JTKV.
Those were both released this year, correct?
No, the Texas in July, which is JT's band. That was last year. I forget when. Maybe October.
We're talking like a 6-month window.
Recent developments.
Where Erra fans in every capacity are eating, right?
Sure, 100%. So
you're getting your fill somewhere.
So suddenly I'm listening to Texas in July and I'm having this real appreciation for what JT brings to the table.
Yeah.
And I'm listening to this Ghost Atlas album, Dust to the Human Shape. And suddenly I'm like really fucking impressed and enamored with Jesse Cash as a musician.
Yeah.
And my mindset coming into this album completely changes from when we heard Pale Iris back before the Concrete Forever tour even happened.
Right.
Up until now, we're getting a steady flow of singles. Cure came out, Crawl Backwards, Out of Heaven. And I'm really starting to anticipate this album, but it's not solely because these singles have been good. It's because suddenly I like the pieces of Erra so much more than I previously thought I had. Like I've got this appreciation for them that just wasn't there with Division or with the self-titled or the albums that came before that. So like, yes, steadily over time, this band has broken me down into appreciating everything that Erra is. And then when they come to this album and like, we're exploring some different sounds, but like a lot of this stuff would have been right at home on that last record, but I am eating it up way more than I anticipated.
Right. Like your relationship with this band has like changed, like it's grown. I really do like that. It makes me think that there's almost like some deviousness to the idea that releasing that Texas in July album, releasing that Ghost Atlas album, were just in theory ways of baiting more people into being interested into Erra, though I don't think that's necessarily the case. Ultimately, if that ends up being a reward of it, it's like a net win for everyone, right?
Sure. And I mean, ultimately, like the sounds that, or sonically, like these are different. Texas in July less so, but like Ghost Atlas is definitely a different taste of Jesse Cash, while still being sort of like the same things he brings to the table here.
Yeah, sure. It's just like more diluted versions of particular aspects of Erra. Like obviously you get like this strictly softer side and then strictly heavier side, and Erra is a combination of both of them at the very least, you know. And then, you know, like the riffs become slightly more complicated to like complement them. But there's a lot of sense to what you're saying, and right. I can see what you mean by that.
So for fans of Erra who are tuned into this review, we're finally meeting you at your level. We are just like you. We're one and the same.
So you're saying this is the first time you're coming into an Erra album actually anticipating it, and I think I might agree with you on that to some degree, because I've never been a huge fan of this band, so it's never a case where I've been uninterested in a release, but I've never been sort of like teetering on the edge of like truly looking forward to it, right? Like seeing it on a calendar and thinking to myself, need to hear this.
I'll be honest, like before that self-titled came out, I was starting to not really appreciate Erra that much, because I don't remember loving that record. I think it was Drift that came out before self-titled. And then we saw them, you know, JT was sick, like performing as support on like that North Lane tour with Erra.
An unfair circumstance to judge a band, but it is the one we experienced.
All of that sort of contributing to me being like, oh, maybe Erra's not quite for me. And then, yes, like over these last handful of years, like really tides have turned completely. And suddenly, yes, I am heading into this album and I am anticipating it. And honestly, like between when this album was first announced to now, my anticipation levels are like, it's a very steep incline.
Right. And then alternatively, they put on an incredible set on that Bad Omens tour.
Yeah. With, again, like some cards stacked against them.
Right. At least from a personal perspective.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just wanted to establish, like, at this point, we are at the point where, like, yes, now we all want to hear what it is there is to like about Cure. Like why the fans came to fucking hear this review. So Sam, what did you like? I'm assuming you liked this album. What did you like about it? Where do you want to start?
Ultimately, I think what I liked about it is a lot of what we already stated, that there is something to this approach where Erra does not bend to any trends. They do not get lost in like this idea of having these like bigger, flashier moments. And I was trying to think of how best to phrase this, but in a way, Erra really just lets the music speak for itself. And I kind of think that in the capacity of an album, this band really flourishes more than they do with singles, because I think when I'm trapped in this band's atmosphere, in like the sonic universe that they cultivate on this record, I truly do become like enthralled and engaged in a way that is diametrically opposed to how I feel like I consume this band from a singles perspective, where I feel like they did come across a little underwhelming with the single releases leading up to this, in a way that didn't fully like undercut my excitement for it. But I almost knew going into it that was going to be the to not write them off for that. And I was right in a sense that when I finished this album, these singles in the context of this record felt much more at home than they did siloed off by themselves.
The only one I think was extremely impressive, siloed off by itself, was Crawl Backwards Out of Heaven.
Is that because it's speaking to the most like inner heavy music appreciator in you?
I don't
It it feels like the more biting of the three singles.
I don't think I like that song specifically because it's the quote unquote heavy one. I think I like that song because it's an interesting, it's just a fucking eye-catching name. It's an unconventional song. It's composed in an unconventional way, in my opinion, from what I expect from this band.
It's a little more complex than your average run-of-the-mill metalcore song. So, like, overall, I just think that, like, Erra cultivates a very enriching sound. It's the kind of thing that, like, you can really just let wash over you and drink in. And, like, that makes them extremely different than the other metalcore albums that I generally tend to gravitate towards. But I think that there is room for an album like this, and there is room for me to really appreciate an album like this, and ultimately room for me to really appreciate the musicianship that I experience throughout this album. And I just walk away from this record and think to myself, these individuals are just truly talented, whether it's the riffage, whether it's the production, or whether it's the philosophical writing style, and ultimately how it all comes together here.
Yeah. What I will tell you, as far as like, I think, yes, you were spot on in that, like, all of the singles here contribute to an overall great album. Like, all of them sound at home in context, all great. I walk away from this release loving, maybe outside of Crawl Backwards Out of Heaven again, that's a standout for me. My favorite tracks on here are non-singles.
Mm-hmm.
And those are tracks like Rumor of Light, which has a really impressive chorus. It's songs like Slow Sour Bleed, which is, this band does not experiment too much on this album, but if they do it in any one place, it is on that song where they implement or they bring in a ton of synthesizer, and like, it's the flashiest this band has ever sounded. So like, they're appealing to me at a primal level.
So unironically, they've almost like met you in the middle here.
They did on this one track for sure. And that one is a big standout for me. I really enjoyed it. I'm curious what the overall energy around that track will be from their
We're talking about cuts, glimpse really popped really for me good. In particular.
Past Life Persona. End to Excess is a fucking banger. Some really, really strong material. I came into this one with high anticipation, and then realized coming out of it that it had delivered on that anticipation, in the sense that, like, I walked out of it really, really impressed. And I ended up really enjoying this record. And for me, Sam, if I had to give you a number rating for this one, it's probably, for right now, first impressions, at least a 9.
I'll undercut you slightly with an 8.5 because I think it's a really strong record release, but I do feel like there is still some aspect of me that does wish that a song or two reached the heights of adoration I had for Divisionary, for example.
Sure.
That I think is something that might be missing from here. I don't think it entirely detracts from the listening experience, but I will say that I would have, I suppose, preferred that there was still a track or two on here that really exceeded expectations and not simply met them.
Okay. No, I can understand that, but still, to land at an 8.5 is, I mean, were you expecting that?
I just think that No, I wasn't. Because you're right. Like, I go into this album knowing that like there is an opportunity here for me to really enjoy this, but ultimately it's not generally the style of metalcore that I'm most attracted to. So I think in a way I have to sort of reframe my perspective a little bit going into an Erra album and understand like what the experience is going to be. And I do feel a little bit like there are bands who do this in a way that I'm much more attuned to. Like last year's album, Heavener from Invent Animate, feels very stylistically similar to this.
This is a similar album for sure.
But that one for me does have those peaks, and it does speak to me a little bit more and my personal tastes. And this one, you know, would slightly live in the shadow of something like that if we're talking about albums that like are in the same breath. But I don't think that necessarily makes this a bad album. It's just like, you know, I'm thinking about what am I like framing this up against, and it's like, you know, I do think there is a version of this album that I do enjoy a little bit better. I think in that sense there maybe is like an even better version of a Erra album as well.
Oh,
you
I
know?
bet. Two things. Just because we didn't really talk about it much, I think my favorite aspect of this record is by far the lyrical angle. The aspect there is, I have very, very much come to appreciate Jesse Cash as a lyricist. And I think part of it, again, is due to me suddenly being sort of enamored with Ghost Atlas. And then hearing like some of like, I don't know, some of the things Jesse Cash says on this album.
There is every once in a while you do hear a line that really makes you like you really like sit there and chew on it for a bit.
Or even just like words, like on one of the singles, like that hideaway line. It, like just hideaway is suddenly a word I really fuck with now, thanks to Erra.
You can certainly appreciate the writing style, like no doubt. I'm 100% with you there. And it's funny because I think early on with this band, I almost had a, I don't know. I don't know how else to say it other than like, I wish they would have dumbed it down a little bit for me without making myself sound stupid in the process. It's like, why use big word when small word work just as well type thing?
Even this review, you have used big words.
I've grown a lot since I've been an Erra fan. Yes, I agree. Me and Erra have grown together. I've grown alongside Erra.
IQ test before Erra, IQ test after Erra.
Yeah.
There's a YouTube video somewhere there.
Hilarious idea.
And sort of, honestly, just to sort of bring the discussion to a close on one of the main points that we brought up during this discussion about preferring flashy bands previously over someone like Erra is like, I'm a changed man on this episode alone when you, not to pit two bad bitches against each other, Sam, but a band like Alpha Wolf in my head, I fuck with more than Erra.
On paper, that's what you're looking for. Yes.
Right. Sonically, I'm looking for an album like Half Living Things more than I'm looking for a Cure from an Erra.
Yeah.
But coming out of this episode, talking about those two albums, I walk away a bigger fan of Cure than I do Half Living Things, even though it's Alpha Wolf doing all the flashy stuff, doing all that excessive stuff. It's not like a rabbit or a hare versus turtle thing, but like, to some credit to Jesse Cash saying like, if we just stick it out, eventually people will meet us here in the middle in some capacity. And like,
what you're trying to say is you did
I'm an
Alpha
example
Wolf,
of that.
but you settled down with Erra.
Precisely. Let's see what's in the news, Sam.
Marcus, as always, the news is brought to you by Sporty Threads, the clothing label of the alternative music scene.
The news.
21 Pilots have dropped new single Next Semester.
The yellow dashes in the street. I prayed those lights would take me home. Then I heard, hey kid, get out of the road.
It follows up Overcompensate, which dropped at the tail end of February, literally the very last day of February, and has racked up nearly 19 million streams on Spotify. Both tracks are set to feature on upcoming new album Clancy, which hits May 17th via Fueled by Ramen. This album will conclude the over a decade-long conceptual narrative that began with 2015's Blurry Face, and which we discussed on the episode in which we reviewed Overcompensate when it came out. So you can go back and listen to that if you want a little debrief on the conceptual nature of this whole experience. Coinciding with the new single drop was the announcement of the Clancy World Tour, a 59-day mega tour that kicks off August 15th in Denver, Colorado. Support remains unannounced. You and I can speculate about that in a little bit. And finally, Marcus, the band currently stands at 28.3 million monthly listeners on Spotify. Marcus, easily one of the most popular bands you and I talk about on a fairly consistent basis.
Yeah, at the moment, this band has certainly come out of the small hibernation they were in, and they've come out of it with some bangers. Honestly,
they came out of the oven hot. They come out of the oven fucking hot. So they released a music video alongside the single drop. And this sort of correlates with a sort of like off the cuff statement I believe Tyler Joseph made on social media, which is that they intend for this album to be fully visual and for every track to get its own music video, which I personally find very exciting, and I love when bands do it. It's a rarity, and obviously it's one that I think is something that, like, you know, is a luxury for the bands that can afford to do it, right? So I understand why it doesn't happen all the time, so it's even more exciting for me when it does.
Overcompensate, that video had like some cool blocking, some cool imagery. I much prefer this video though.
Why is that? Why do you much prefer this video?
It has such a theatric feel or element to specifically the performance aspect. It feels like I'm watching fucking a movie.
You know what it is specifically? I think it's this idea that it's 21 Pilots and you're almost experiencing something that is true, that feels real, but is as unrealistic as anything else this band does, which is this idea of seeing this band in like a tiny venue, putting on like this show for like
no
100 of their closest fans. Right. Just this fucking sweaty, down the earth little punk rock show. Feels feasible, but is as unrealistic as, you know, this band being dragged underwater by a dragon. But
it's also a way more organic feel than what will ultimately come of that Blink-182 Denny's performance video that they filmed a ways back.
Right.
And there's been some other bigger bands that have done this recently. I'm blanking on who, but like, yes.
Well, you're talking about like Green Day in the backyard for like Bobby Sox.
I mean, if I had to compare this to anything, like this is sort of on that same level that Taking Back Sunday backyard video is. Like, it definitely feels intimate. It feels filmed really well.
What's ironic is I actually prefer the other aspect of this video, which is the shots of like headlights moving down the road and Tyler Joseph standing in the middle of that road and having to like dodge these oncoming cars that are coming to him. And then like this brisk moment of him in like this cap, this theoretical Clancy costume, I guess is how I interpret it.
All of this connecting with like
which has like an A24 energy to it.
Yeah, well, all of this connecting
Dream
with
sequence.
Like the greater story of what we're talking about in the song. You know, I remember what I was wearing, standing in the road. I see yellow dotted lines, or yellow lines on the road. I see headlights coming at me, and then someone yells, "Hey kid, get out the road!"
Can I be real with you?
Dodges out from the car.
Can I be fucking real with you right now? One of the hardest lines I've heard all year.
You remember what you were wearing?
No.
I know.
This very in context, "Hey kid, get out of the road," I think has this narrative weight to it that is more powerful than any fucking mosh call I've heard all year. It feels it when you think about it, when you think about the context to it, it just fucking weighs on you.
It also makes me appreciate 21 Pilots, like, and the narrative that they establish in a lot of their music more when they pull something like that. like the frame of mind they must have been in. Like how are they interlacing this narrative? How are they writing this in the studio? Like all of this is just in Tyler's mind. That I appreciate way more than when they tell me, you know, there's 17 disciples on a fucking island.
okay.
You know what I mean? Like, show me the narrative. And like, I don't know, that this song, I like Overcompensate. I really fuck with this song though.
I think they're two perfect songs right out of the gate. I can't believe how
Automatically more excited for this one than the last record.
precisely correct. Yeah, it's like, you know, I think it's been well-treaded ground, and I won't go over it again, like feelings on Skilled and Icy, but I'm just happy that I'm this excited about the new 21 Pilots record, because it makes me adoration for this band feel deeply reinvigorated.
No, 100%.
Marcos. Stand Atlantic team up with Bruises in Paris for new single Girls. New album Was Here hits August 23rd through Hopeless Records. It will include previous singles Kill Her, Warzone, and Sex on the Beach. And in addition to Bruises in Paris, it will include features from Sueco and Polaris. Vocalist Bonnie Fraser on the new track via Kerrang! Buckle in. This is 3 paragraphs long. I feel like the message of the song speaks for itself. I wanted to show my appreciation for women and personally my experience growing up, knowing I was attracted to women, but still feeling like I had to fit the mold of the male gaze just based on the way I was influenced by a male-dominated society. I hope other queer women and women in general resonate with this track, but also anyone in between. I wrote it for anyone who's ever felt squashed by the strange and subtle pressure society can place on young people based off of old as shit paradigms. That being said, having Lynn and Amelia, Bruises, on this track made it so much more meaningful to me personally. Both female, queer, and talented artists I respect so much. Making this music video was, and I quote, within a quote, friggin' gas, which I love. Me and Lynn both had the same idea independently of each other when she agreed to be on the track. Let's be old ladies. I'm sure people expected us all to be selling sex and queer baiting the shit out of this. So we did what any rap video would do, but as old ladies, Marcos, end quote. Before I move on, any aspect of that you want to touch on other than your natural urge to start using friggin' gas in regular conversation moving forward?
I do have a freaking problem now. Yeah.
Yeah. It's friggin' gas. Yeah.
We're about to get into this. But
all right,
like,
let's keep going. Then Lynn Gunn is the vocalist of Paris, Marcus, whose most recent single, Burn the Witch, featuring Tommy Genesis and Alice Young Gao, released earlier this March. Paris currently stands at 2.2 million monthly listeners on Spotify.
And that's what I wanted to touch on here is
all right,
the specifically between the collaboration here is Lynn Gunn for a couple of reasons, including themselves in this scene a little bit more, because it feels like we were trying to, for a second, we were starting to push ourselves pretty far out from it. So to collaborate with someone like Stand Atlantic is awesome. And just overall, the collaboration side of things with Paris, right now, we are fucking eating. I personally really enjoyed Burn the Witch. I love Lynn's feature on this. It's nice to see Lynn sometimes having a good time, because the vibes can get real fucking, the energy can get real fucking crazy.
It can
on
get
some
dark.
Of those Paris songs.
I didn't include it here, but so Burn the Witch was, it featured Tommy Genesis and Alice Young Gao, both women, and Paris, and maybe specifically Lynn Gunn, made sort of a statement alongside the release of that song that they intended to work specifically, and I want to say only collaborating with women on an upcoming project. And it almost gave me the impression that this song initially, when I saw that it was announced, was going to be part of that. But it looks like it is part of Stand Atlantic's release, but still seems to fall within the exact setup that Lynn Gunn established for herself for this year, which I kind of like the extremely standing true to like your vision on that.
Maybe it's just like a
so you say she's working
offshoot
with the scene, but more explicitly, she's working with another woman in the scene.
Yeah, 100%. A coincidental offshoot, maybe, or maybe this is what Paris is talking about in general. It's still hard to say exactly what.
Yeah, whether that would
project
be
of
some sort
theirs
of full-length project or just like is quite literally Paris, like whether it's through Paris or through somebody else working with other women. Bruises, Marcos is a singer, producer, and composer, as well as 3-time Latin Grammy nominee from Tijuana, Mexico. Stand Atlantic marks their third collaboration this year following Imagina alongside Genitalic and Los Calagares, and Dopamina with Madeline. Bruises currently boasts 1.3 million monthly listeners on Spotify. And of course, I apologize if I mispronounce anyone's name.
I feel like you did an okay job. Not that I'm sitting from a point of.
You're not exactly like a...
Yeah, just feel like you pat yourself on the back.
I appreciate that, Marcos. On the feature from Polaris, it's worth noting Bonnie's history with heavy music, Marcos. Here's a quote from an interview with the Aquarian back in 2023. By the way, the Aquarian sounds like a villain from like a John Wick movie or something. Quote, when we started this band, at least for me and Potter, we listened to heavy music all the time.
Potter.
Relax. Potter being another member of Stand Atlantic.
Freaking gas name.
I went to a festival in Australia, the one called Hardcore 08, so it was in 2008, and there was Hardcore 09 and whatever. Like, we go to these festivals and we're listening to heavy music all of the time. One of my favorite bands is Parkway Drive. We've always grown up with that. It's always influenced in us in some way. And I think it was important to include this quote because otherwise, you know, Polaris obviously stands out heavily as a feature on a genuinely, almost consistently pop punk band who, while yes, has treaded into slightly heavier territory, they have never gone full-blown metalcore. Stand Atlantic currently hover at approximately 655,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. Mark, get it all out of your system. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I want to talk about Hardcore 08, 09, whatever.
Yeah.
This to me feels like when you know how certain companies will go overseas, like international, but they'll change their name. So like maybe this isn't a real example, but like
I do know this.
Taco Bell is Taco Bell in the US, right? But you go to like Indonesia and it's Taco Palace. But like the branding is also different. But you go there and it's like, oh, we got like fucking crunchy gordita, cheesy, extreme supremes. It's the same menu. This is just Taco Bell. That's what I feel like Hardcore 08 and 09 is. Just like, it's actually just Warped Tour for Australians, but Kevin Lyman didn't tell them that.
So fucking funny. This idea is very fucking funny.
It's just because the name is so fucking basic. It was only called Hardcore, and then they put the years after it.
Agreed.
It's strange.
I feel as if there's so much to chew on here. I almost don't know where to start.
Yeah, we're all over the place here. Couple things. I like a fucking Latin feature. Okay,
I actually like it too.
That's something this scene was fucking missing, Sam.
I feel like this song hit different the second Bruises came on it. Like, I was enjoying it, and that put it over the top for me. We went from good to friggin' gas.
That hit Sam, and I was like, Dios mío.
Precisely correct.
Dios mío. So I really fuck with the Bruises feature here. Again, I'm just enamored for the rest of my life with anything and everything fucking Lynn Gunn does and touches. And I think Paris is still like one of the coolest projects that this scene has to offer. And everything about this Stand Atlantic album has me excited, right? So including all of these tracks we've recently heard from them in Warzone, Kill Her, Sex on the Beach. These are all great tracks.
That 2023 interview was around the release of Kill Her, so we go back like nearly a year on that one.
Girls, a great track. So right now I think we've
diversity in these songs as well.
I love, we didn't talk about it, the album artwork here is like, it's
of the year right now, and it's by a landslide.
Rarely does just putting your artist, like putting the band on the album art work for me, but it super works here. And it's just this band laying.
It's a grotesque presentation of them, one that like really speaks to our general like affinities and tastes.
They're all sitting like horizontal or laying down like horizontally.
They've all been murdered.
They've been pulled and
dragged.
There's blood behind them. It's very cool. A very visually grabbing album cover. And then, like, what's promised that we haven't heard yet, a Swaco feature. I fucking love Swaco. I love me some Swake.
Fucking Swaco feature. I feel like was
It's
almost like
freaking gas.
undercut by like Polaris being like this such oddball outside baseball choice.
But that's what I mean. It's like you see Swaco, and it's just like your excitement levels just keep fucking higher and higher, and then you get Polaris, and it's like, well, now we're talking.
Yeah, now we're cooking with gasoline, precisely.
Freaking gas.
It just feels like Stand Atlantic really wanted to do exactly what Stand Atlantic actually honestly does so best, which is just
There's a
be
freedom.
absolutely completely unpredictable
Yeah.
in anything that they choose to do.
They have like broken whatever chains they had since that last album released, or like that started with that last album. And now I feel like everything Stand Atlantic does or promises to do is exciting in some fashion, and I'm here for it.
Yeah.
I am, as the kids say, sat.
And I am, as the Australians say, friggin' gas. Moving on. Mothica has released new single, Doomed.
I was born with a curse in a perfect suburb, and it only got worse. I was drawn to the dark with the devil's mark. I was doomed from the start.
New album Kissing Death drops August 23rd via their own imprint, Heavy Heart Records, in partnership with Rise Records. The release will be a visual album with each song featuring an accompanying music video, and Doomed is notated as being episode 1 of the series. Marcus, so funny for me to establish how rare this is, only to talk about 2 artists in the same episode who are taking this approach of creating a
Mothica,
visual
21
album.
Pilots. Yep.
Marcos, I said earlier that Stand Atlantic quote was long. It was only a taste compared to this Mothica quote that
Respectfully.
is around the new track, Respectfully, via Rock Sound. Slight trigger warning, I suppose, is worth noting that the subject matter here gets very serious, but revolves around the song itself.
Important context.
I think Doomed is a sibling of my song Forever 15. It's a melancholy ballad and has the shoegaze influence at the end of the song that swells up with intensity. I've heard people talk about gifted child syndrome or about feeling like a disappointment compared to the accolades they were given as a young kid, and I didn't know other people felt the same way. I was a smart kid with a bright future, and sometimes I feel like my depression sabotaged some of the light I had. In the second verse, I open up about my experience in my church youth group and my abusive youth pastor. When I was just coming out of middle school, I was awkward and insecure, and I hoped church would be a safe place to make friends, but I was taken advantage at my most vulnerable. I wish I could go back and protect myself from some of the things I went through, and it was incredibly therapeutic to recreate my teenage bedroom for the music video. I casted my friend to play a younger version of me, adorned in 2009 emo Warped Tour era posters, and show this angsty, misunderstood girl. I am terrified to put the song out, but I showed the ending to my therapist, and she teared up, so I felt like this was an important song to lead the album with. It feels like a small sliver of my origin story. Mothica currently stands at 1.1 million monthly listeners on Spotify.
Damn.
Impressive, right?
Very impressive. Good for Mothica. So a lot to chew on here. Obviously don't relate to, fortunately, everything Mothica expresses here, but there's one thing I did want to touch on, which is like the it's essentially like the being like a young gifted kid or whatever. And I had this thought earlier today. It's like, man, I used to be such a good fucking student. Like
This is so funny.
in like 4th and 5th grade, like I went to every day of school. Like I didn't have a single sick day, and none of that amounted to a goddamn fucking thing. Like I should have just I should have missed days at school. Like I was so worried about like attendance and shit. I thought like I was best of the best. And then reflecting on it, I'm like, first of all, this podcast, I'm here.
This is one of the most interesting approaches you've ever talked to discussing a song.
I'm just
period.
relating. I'm just relating.
Right.
So I just wanted to share that. I thought that was funny.
Mothica, insanely talented artist.
I'd be depressed too, Mothica. You and me, we're in this together.
Marcos went to school every day.
I thought I had a bright future. I don't have a 1.1 million.
Arguably both gifted
listeners.
kids. You can make an argument for either, honestly. Mothica, 1.1 billion listeners on Spotify.
I used to have fucking
Incredibly talented artist.
I had posters of fucking Andy Black up in my room.
Marcus
One and the
also had
same.
those. I will say that the
Twins.
Tumblr aesthetic of 2009 emo Warped Tour era that is captured in this video is pitch perfect. Like, no notes. Absolutely nailed it from top to bottom. You feel the realness of that space, which I think is not an easy thing to capture without making it feel like a set. They make it feel like a truly lived in room, like one where it's almost like you could close your eyes and envision yourself in there.
Song is special. Video and the production that went into it certainly puts it over the edge for me.
It
And
makes you
what you're
really
saying,
excited for
like,
the idea this is a visual album, right?
Well, we have like these videos from like 2009, 2010, clearly of Mothica as a teenager, but then like they incorporate like the footage from this day and age that is that throwback where it's just an actress in Mothica's place, but like, yes, like you said, like stage production, like have completely
very natural
recreated-
transition, as if it too could have been home video of like their
Yeah.
experience. Yeah.
But like you said, like have recreated like that scene bedroom to perfection.
all of the technology that's in it as well, like that era of cell phone, that era of computer, like all of it, just like so beautifully
the
done.
style of dress.
And then also to have this like moment too that shows like Mothica in church, and just so subtly to have the
Yeah.
pastor like drag his hand across her back says everything in an instant
It's the
without it being
subtlety.
spelled out for
Sure.
you in any capacity. Like it ends up feeling very powerful in that sense. And I think the sort of like melancholic feeling of this song like really ties it all together beautifully. Like Mothica, insanely talented, keep your eye on type artist, like definitely one of like the which you'd consider the hottest
Next up.
upcoming artist, right, within the alternative music scene.
Yeah, really well said. Go check out Mothica today if you have not listened to them.
Marcus, Gerard Way will be releasing a new horror-based comic series titled Paranoid Gardens. In a report from Deadline, the My Chemical Romance vocalist and creator of popular comic and also popular Netflix series The Umbrella Academy will co-write the series alongside Sean Simon, and it will be illustrated by Chris Weston. The first issue will launch July in July via Dark Horse Comics. The synopsis reads as follows. Lou is a nurse at the most bizarre care center around. The staff are not entirely human, and the cases are downright unearthly. Aliens, ghosts, superheroes, and more creatures plague its hallways as doctors and patients and the hospital itself seem to be somewhat self-aware. Lou believes that despite a recent failure at her job, she's been given some sort of higher calling in this mysterious place and decides to rise to the challenge. Along the way, she must fight her way through corrupt staff members, powerful theme park cults, and her own personal demons and trauma to meet the challenge and discover what secrets the gardens hold.
Freaking gas.
Gerard on the new series. I'm excited to be back with the incredibly handsome and talented brother from another basement, Sean Simon, penning a story that's really special to us, and honored the masterful Chris Weston joined us to create a visually powerful and emotionally tangible physical object that is this comic.
Over under, does this end up being longer than Umbrella Academy or not?
I think it might have been established that this is going to be 6 issues, and I can't say if overall that's long. I have like...
Is Umbrella Academy 6 issues or like 3 volumes?
I don't know, because I have like 3 volumes, but those volumes might be one story composed of multiple issues. I just like, this is how
This
I
is
consumed
where
it, so
our
it's hard for me to say.
limitation of knowledge here
Yeah, like we've run
on
into
subject
a wall
matter.
here. Quote continues, I'm now more complete, getting to share something we've wanted to for a very long time and working with this fantastic group of individuals in the process. The final season of the Umbrella Academy hits Netflix on August 8th, and My Chemical Romance will be playing When We Were Young Fest in Las Vegas, Nevada later this year. So Gerard Way, ever the busy individual, just like putting his whole self into his creative output recently.
I mean, honestly, right? It feels like I always want to say like Gerard Way never doing shit. Gerard Way do be up to things.
This raises questions.
What part of this raises questions?
If Gerard Way has been involved with this comic series and this has been his creative output, do you think that My Chemical Romance have been working on music in tangent, or My Chemical Romance are not working on music at all? And with, you know, Frank being in like LS Dunes and them working on music, do you see do you see these artists working on other creative outputs and think to yourself, well, maybe none of them are working on My Chemical Romance, or maybe they're working on it in addition to this? I don't know. I'm just asking a question.
It's so hard to say, because we could live in a reality where this album has been completed for 2 years now. You know, like I think you could talk yourself into this album already existing or this album not existing now or for another 2 years. Obviously, Frank been in the studio. I mean, My Chemical Romance at some point been in the studio. They wrote a whole fucking song. They released it, which is why, you know, that led some credence. Is that the fucking phrasing?
Yeah.
To that album maybe being out there, more songs being out there at minimum, right? Get in the studio just to record one song. I don't know about that. Maybe some bands. This one, maybe not.
Okay, so ultimately you're saying is we do not have enough here to go off of. You never watched or read The Umbrella Academy.
I watched a couple episodes of Umbrella Academy. I did not watch most of The Umbrella Academy, if that's what you're trying to get at, Sam.
I guess my next question would be, what is, if any, your appetite for a comic series from Gerard Way?
You know my answer. I probably won't read this. Okay. I do think that like that synopsis is eye-catching. It's, you know, I'm interested. I don't see myself reading this. I expect you to find yourself reading volume 1.
Absolutely.
Or issue 1.
You're right. And thus continuing if I find myself really enjoying it. But I think there is some level of me that's like, oh, I have the Umbrella Academy comics. I would like to also own more of Gerard Way's output, just because I'm so enthralled with him as like a artist, whether it's from My Chemical Romance or from his comic series.
I don't think that monetary gain is something that Gerard Way, like, I don't think that is what we work towards if we're Gerard Way, but I have to guess that dipping our toes back into making comics, or whatever this is considered, it's got to be because that Netflix money do talk a little.
So ultimately, I salivate most at the idea that, yes, this is a premise for another series on Netflix, because I personally adore the Umbrella Academy show. I started there and then went back and read the comics after. So my top like ideal scenario here is, yes, we're 3 years removed from the Paranoid Garden TV show.
Sam, let's do it now. Who gets cast as Lou?
I mean, Jenna Ortega, without seeing anything else, would be my ideal here.
So let's
even
see.
Though she's already the lead in Wednesday,
is a nurse at the most bizarre care center around. The staff are not entirely human.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's hard to say.
Does that not breathe Jenna Ortega? Does that not scream Jenna Ortega?
It does, but like, I'm trying to think like, okay, who does Netflix have?
You're talking Millie Bobby Brown? You're talking Millie Bobby Brown?
Could be
We're talking about
Bobby Brown.
Who Netflix might have like in their pocket.
We could go way out there. Like maybe we cast someone respectfully slightly older, like maybe a Jillian Jacobs, right?
No, I don't like this at all.
No?
It's got to be cast younger. I don't know if you ever watched this show, but it's like, it was called like The End of the Fucking World or something. And the lead actress in that show, whose name escapes me, is one of the greatest actresses in the history of the medium. Just like endlessly funny, but completely deadpan at all times. And I feel like I see this character in this, but it's hard to do it without reading the comic and actually getting to know the character in any capacity, right? Yeah. To know who works in this. So it's just me saying things like Zendaya would eat this role. You know what I mean?
Would eat this role, you're
right?
Because
it's just me naming actresses who I adore.
Part of me though does want to be the person who accidentally cast who is in this. Like I don't want
So you're
people to
saying
go back
if
and
you
be like,
spit enough names out, you'd
Right.
be like, what
SOTS.
if Mia Goth? What if?
right? SOTS saw this. They had a vision. They were right.
I with you. Who's the other girl from Stranger Things? Max is the character name, but the actress has a name all to herself as well. That's completely escaping me.
She does have a name all to herself.
Also a good pick. Marcus, one last news story this week. Bad Omens dominate the hot, hard rock songs Billboard chart. In a recent write-up for Forbes, it was noted that the band currently claims 6 songs on the chart, albeit with one caveat. At number 1 is Just Pretend, which has spent not consecutively, but total 48 weeks at number 1. So it can claim nearly at this point, potentially a year's worth of time at number 1. Again, not consecutively, but fucks.
How many weeks in a year?
52.
Okay, just making sure. I thought you thought it was 48 for a second.
It's 52. I'm saying they're near there. I
Okay.
said they were near
Well,
there.
you said
At number 2, Marcus, is The Death of Peace of Mind. So they own the top 2 spots. And they round out the top 10 with Van, a collaboration with Poppy, of course. At number 16, Marcos, and this is the caveat because it is not a Bad Omen song, would be Novocaine by Too Close to Touch, which features Noah Sebastian. So it's kind of like a little bit of a partial credit there, but Forbes did say, hey, you know, we're kind of like, we're checking this one too in the box because this is Bad Omen's name essentially showing up on this chart in a different position, even though it's not their song. At number 24, Marcus is Artificial Suicide. And number 25 is Nowhere to Go. Nowhere to Go is the one that caught me off guard a little bit, I'm going to be honest. I don't feel like I have a memory of that song ever being a single release. Am I incredibly incorrect?
I don't remember now.
I know this band had a rollout that felt like everything was a single release at one point or another, but that one did not, like, I feel like I didn't immediately pull like a music video or anything that, not like I can with like The Gray or like a Villain or whatever.
So that's what I want to talk about.
That's curious, right?
Like a Villain for me was immediately what felt like the standout song that has the most airplay potential off of this record. And I feel like some fans have shared that sentiment, and seeing it not even on here is kind of crazy. Because it feels like that should have been the song that took off for this.
Which
band.
one?
Like a Villain.
Like a Villain. Yeah. I agree with that sentiment, but it's like, you know, it's so funny to sit here and be like,
you can't moneyball this shit. I know that.
5 official Bad Omen songs on here. Could have been 6.
Well, no,
Should
but
have been 6, because let me give you a little more context, Marcos. This article notes that the only other artist to currently hold multiple spots on here is Bring Me the Horizon with 2. So Bad Omens has like 5 plus their involvement with this Too Close to Touch track. Second to that would be Bring Me the Horizon with 2 songs.
So the craziest thing here, and I'm sure they probably have one. Sleep Token doesn't even have multiple ones. And I consider Sleep Token to be the bigger band at this point, at least in my mind. But I think it's different in practice.
Well, you're right, because you think like, hey, Bad Omens is out here opening for Bring Me the Horizon. And then quietly while they're doing that,
I mean, Sleep Token will be
we're
doing the
doing
same
4
thing.
straight arena dates. Yeah, in Australia, actually,
Yeah.
as a matter of fact, within a week. But then you look at like what's charting currently, and it's like, well, Bring Me's got 2 songs on here, and Bad Omens has like 6 of the most popular songs in the country right now, which is insane. Again, 5 plus 1 with a caveat.
Yeah.
Marcus, Bad Omens currently hold 5.5 million monthly listeners on Spotify, where Just Pretend sits at the top of their most streamed songs with 185 bazillion streams.
Ain't nothing for this band.
185 million streams. Yes. I just like it caught me a little bit off guard because I was not unaware that like Just Pretend and The Death of Peace of Mind were like almost living on this chart.
Yeah.
And that Van had popped onto this chart, and that Too Close to Touch, like very excitingly for me, had notched a spot on this, and it's like one of the most overdue like tip of the caps to like such a talented band, right? But like again, still a collaboration with Bad Omens, so a bit of like partial credit there. But it's seeing that they had 2 songs that I didn't even realize were still registering regularly as hits at the bottom of this list as well. It's like, fuck me. Like, it does feel like 3 weeks from now, you could see Like a Villain just like quietly slide onto this off an album that is over 2 years old at this point.
It's to compare it to something. It's like when a band, they'll post like, oh my God, we just broke like the top 10 albums for hard rock in sales on iTunes right now. And it's always sandwiched in between like top hits from Mothica and like the Rainbow album from the Prism.
Floyd.
Yeah, the Pink Floyd album. And it's like, those are just mainstays on here.
Yeah,
so it feels like
we just passed Queen on the top 10. Queen, of course, has been there for 25 years.
Right. So it feels like now, like the Plot and You is going to release a song and it's going to be like, oh man, we just cracked through the top 25 again. And they're going to share the screenshot and it's going to be in between 5 Bad Omens songs.
Do you?
And it's going to feel natural at this point.
Do you feel like this has maybe been a net negative for those of us who have been not so patiently waiting for the next album to be announced?
Oh, yeah.
Because if I'm this band, I'm thinking to myself,
Yeah.
we're good.
Take a quick
let's
vacation.
just go ahead and absolutely own this chart with our songs from 2 years ago.
Right.
No need to rush out there. Like, Van's doing well, but it's not like anyone's like, it's not like we have a desperate need to like hold the attention of anyone. Like, we've got it. It's ours, unless you want to capitalize on it in some capacity, in which case, like, I know Van could very well be the beginning of that, but like, what the fuck? Are they gonna have 12 songs on here?
But it's
like, what the fuck more could you even want?
It's funny though, because you mentioned Van and you're exactly right. And it's like, okay, well, let's make sure the momentum stays and we release Van. And it's like, okay, well, sure, like automatically somehow entered into this top 25, but also it's not overtaking the 2 big ones. So why rush and drop another song? At this point, let's keep riding it out. Who the fuck cares?
It's also worth like considering, are Bad Omens like potentially the Kanye of this scene, in that they may be the very let me finish.
Okay.
Let me finish.
I guess they both
Let
have
me
worn
finish.
masks.
Could this be like one of the first instances where like we theoretically see a band maybe drop an album and like they're the top 7 songs on this chart just because they dropped it?
Is that a Kanye thing?
Yeah, like it's like a Kanye Drake thing. Like, they'll drop an album and they'll be like, oh, Kanye has the top 3 songs on Spotify right now, just because they dropped a new album and it's like, hey, this one features so-and-so, this one features so-and-so. All these names are so fucking hot that like immediately you should. So like theoretically, like Bad Omens comes and they're like, boom, here's the brand new album. And suddenly like 7 songs off of the album chart, just because like the whole album is doing so insanely
It's fucking
well.
fascinating. One tidbit here though, like, and I do want to touch more on Novocaine just because I feel like that is the coolest part about this story, and also the one that deserves a little bit more attention. And we'll get to that in a second. But as far as like announce the next album, I feel like we have announced a deluxe.
We didn't though, not officially.
No details.
Not officially. We've only done it almost in passing. Like, we're working on this. We're working on these things.
Yeah.
And I think all of this came, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe all of this came from an interview they did with Benji Madden, like the artist friendly all press thing. But none of that is like I never received a press release that said like releasing in fucking mid-July is the deluxe reissue of The Death of Peace of Mind with fucking 4 reimagined tracks and 6 collaborations and blah, 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 and 2 acoustic and so on. But talking about Novocaine a little bit before we move on.
Just really cool, like you said. It feels like Too Close to Touch finally getting their flowers. Bittersweetly after so many things that have happened here. But I think it's also cool that it is climbing. Like this song is not showing any signs of slowing down. Like at this point, overtaking Van is a possibility. You know, it's in outside of just being here on this Billboard fucking hard rock hot big guns top 100 fucking whatever. It's also charting on like the Spotify viral hits chart thing. I don't exactly know like the specifications or what qualifies, what doesn't, but like, or why it qualifies. But like that song is everywhere, getting the attention it deserves. I think that's really exciting. It is nice that even though the release of Novocaine and the release of Four Keeps has come and gone, it is still seemingly in a lot of people's mouths, at the forefront of a lot of people's minds. And I say that strictly just as one of the biggest fans of Too Close to Touch in general, like the big fans here at SOTS, because again, it is so good to see that band through all of the misfortune and you know what I'm referring to, still emerge somewhat victorious in the sense that like finally getting their flowers.
Agreed.
Finally.
Completely. And not
Way
like
overdue.
not like a blip either, like an ongoing continuous like
Exactly.
celebration. I agree. Yeah, it's heartening. Marks a couple of anniversaries and then we'll get out of here. I Prevail released Trauma half a decade ago on March 29th, 2019.
Traumatic. I don't like that album is 5 years old.
It's weird.
I
think
don't
about
like that.
Right. I Prevail feels like a band who's only 5 years old to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like in a really weird way. I Prevail still feels like one of the fresh faces on the scene. Also, talk about a band who's fucking due. Like this wasn't like obviously they've had an album since this, but like
yeah, it's
fucking
time.
due. Yeah,
Yeah.
like let's get a new song. Fall Out Boy released Evening Out with Your Girlfriend 21 years ago on March 25th, 2003, Marcos. I need you to look at something and tell me what your interpretation is of this. An evening out with your...
Before I do that, can I preface this with I actually don't know what this is. I don't know if this is
the album cover.
This is an album.
This was like their first EP or whatever. This was like Fall Out Boy's first release. Does that look like 5 members of Fall Out Boy, or is that Fall Out Boy with a guy who's out on a date with his girlfriend? Because for me, it looks like Fall Out Boy had 5 members.
That looks like Fall Out Boy has 5 members, and
who's the lost Fall Out Boy member?
It's the twin Patrick Stump 8 after birth. Like,
Okay.
we got the glasses.
And obviously, if anything tragic happened to them, I apologize immediately,
Yeah, of
but I'm
course.
extremely curious.
This is an album. Is this their debut album?
It's like it's their debut
considered?
EP. It's like their debut EP.
Is this when Fall Out Boy was like a hardcore band, or was that just like a Pete Wentz side quest?
I've never listened to it, so it's hard to say. We might have to circle back on this whole
Okay.
conversation. Marcos, and finally, on this week, 2 years ago, we lost Tyler Hawkins of Foo Fighters and Keaton Pierce of Too Close to Touch. One of the most fucking miserable weeks in history. I remember it vividly. I just like, I remember being at a concert and then like hearing a Foo Fighter song and hearing like a Too Close to Touch song and just being like, oof, this fucking sucks.
Who was it?
Afterlife was not the headliner, but I believe it was Afterlife and a couple other or was it Point North? I don't remember exactly what time frame.
Yeah, that might have been it.
It could
would
have been Point North, or it could have been like a metalcore show. I'm not exactly positive.
I thought it was a metalcore show.
I know the venue, but I just can't remember exactly the
Which venue?
bands. It was upstairs at the Webster.
Huh. Interesting. Man, talk about time and place. You knew where you were as far as learning about these deaths. I remember being in the middle of recording a podcast, this podcast, SOTS, and it already being a bummer of an episode because we had to address that Taylor Hawkins had passed. And granted, you know, I never really talked about Foo Fighters in that big of a capacity on the show in the past, but like
Wait, I thought it'd be
Taylor
I've always been a
Hawkins.
fan.
Yeah, but Taylor Hawkins, like a pretty popular and memorable figure. And obviously after the outpouring of love for that artist when they passed, like very, very clear, discussing it on the show. And like you checking your phone like 10 minutes after that and seeing that Too Close had posted that on Instagram was fucking it ruined the rest of that show, obviously, but like I just remember like thinking vibes couldn't have gotten worse until they did that episode.
I think
that day.
Keaton and like Chester were always the two hardest for me, where it felt like the moment I found out, somebody had just fucking kicked me in my stomach.
Fucking Kyle Pavone broke me.
Yeah, that's also, yeah. You know what? As a matter of fact, we've done this too many times.
And to rank that's, yeah.
But yeah, don't ever want to forget them, and don't ever look forward to living through these types of things again. That's been an episode, everyone. We love and appreciate you. Again, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, please leave 5 stars. It helps us. If you're watching on YouTube, please leave a thumbs up. And if you want to support the show, go to patreon.com/SOTS podcast. Bye.
Good.